Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 145. It's a surprise, PEP. Surprise. PEP is, of course, Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel and Wednesdays at 9, 51, 52, 53, something like that for the next few weeks. And on iView, on Facebook at ABC Planet America, and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that is too nerdy for television. We're recording this right now at 9 a.m. on a Monday, New Orleans time, or 2 a.m. in Australia on Tuesday, so you can work out what we know has happened and what we don't. If you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook at YouTube, where you will see someone who will never raise the stakes on inconsequential views. It's Elle Hardy. Hello, Elle.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. First thing in the morning. I don't know if it is for you, but for me, it'll be 2 hours before I wake up. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with me being up at 9 a.m., but 2 a.m. is quite an effort. So thank you.
That's okay. I noticed that the ABC don't have the air conditioning turned on at night time, which is you as a taxpayer, or the Australian taxpayers listening, you would be thrilled by that. They're not wasting your money, but I might get a little bit moist as the podcast goes on. So we'll see how we go. Elle, talking about air conditioning, what are you grateful for?
Oh, what am I grateful for?
If there's nothing, that's fine.
Well, I mean, actually, I am. We'll stay on air conditioning. I was actually just reading something recently about how the south of the US, where I live, is basically the big revolution in the 70s that started bringing a lot of business and government down here was basically all due to air conditioning. And New Orleans, being the advent of air conditioning sort of changed a lot of the makeup of America. And New Orleans is the hottest place on earth. It is like almost unlivable in summer. We are very, very grateful for air conditioning.
Absolutely. Well, that makes sense. I remember reading about how air conditioning is considered to be one of the most important modern inventions, full stop. And the reason for that is because you can't have skyscrapers without air conditioning. And so, because obviously you can't open a window in a skyscraper. And so air conditioning was essential for cities to become their modern form, and that prompted a lot of progress. And so how many other inventions and progress occurred as a result of air conditioning? Quite a lot. So I think history is with you. What I am grateful for is, when you're aware that something is happening, you're not quite sure how to put into words. Something's going on. You got a vibe for it. You can almost predict it happening, but you just don't know how to enunciate what's going on because it's a new kind of thing. And every now and then someone comes along and puts a phrase on it and you go, that's it. And then it just helps you grab a hold of it in your head, and I love when that happens. And it just happened for me last week. And it's from a dude called Mike Caulfield. So I'm grateful to Mike. He's a researcher at the University of Washington. And what he coined is the expression evidence maximalism. And let me explain to you what this is referring to. This is actually, I read about this in a piece in The Atlantic. I'll put it in the homework, which you can see under either the video of Facebook or YouTube, or in the blurb of the podcast. Basically, this article, it was in the context of the Taylor Swift conspiracy theory, but it's not really about Taylor Swift. It's something you see all the time online. And it's when people treat everything, no matter what, as evidence that directly supports their ideological barrow. Wherever news breaks, they just go, oh yeah, that is proof of this barrow I've been pushing for the last 6 months. Right? He gives 3 rules for evidence maximalism. Number 1, any small thing can be evidence of my thing. 2, any big thing is always evidence of my thing. 3, all your evidence against my thing is on closer inspection actually very strong evidence for my thing. And he gives an example of this, that most people don't care about DEI programs at Fortune 500 companies, for instance. That's the kind of thing that interests a very small number of people. But when, say, hypothetically speaking, a plane door rips off mid-flight, it provides an opening. And from there, any motivated actor can go to Google and they can look up, they know that the Boeing plane had mechanical trouble. So they go to the Boeing website, they have a look around some press releases, they find a DEI report that says the company's looking to increase the black representation rate. Bingo, there's a causal link. Now people care, and it's evidence for their big theory they've been pushing forever, even though in reality, the truth has got nothing to do with that. Doesn't matter. And it's just more proof of their theory. Evidence maximalism essentially turns otherwise irrelevant news stories into confirmation for your hobby horse. And the right obviously love this. The example I gave was from the right, but it's nonpartisan. This is the internet. If you recall back in 2020/2021, everything was evidence of white supremacy. That was the same thing. That was evidence maximalism for the left, right? Where just whatever happened, you go, oh yeah, here we go. That's evidence for what I'm talking about. Why do we care about this? It's because evidence maximalism doesn't just poison discourse or make for weird headlines. This is a quote I'm reading now. It leeches humanity out of the way people see the world. Too often, evidence maximalists take the misfortunes, successes, and stories of other humans and turn them into exhibits presented to an imaginary jury to win a trial they will never win. A mass shooting becomes a political cudgel. A tragic death turns into a way to question science. A bunch of teens on TikTok becomes a stand-in for the radical left. What is at stake is an information ecosystem where there's less and less focus on what's happening to people because the story itself is meaningless outside of a way to score political points. An environment governed by the laws of evidence maximalism is a cold, nihilistic one. And when I read this, I just thought, yes! I've been saying this for years and I knew it was happening, but I didn't quite know how to put into words. So that's my phrase, evidence maximalism. And there are some great examples of that coming up in this podcast. So I want to get up at the top there. So anyway, I'm grateful for that. Do you agree, Elle, is this an issue?
Yeah, very, very much so. I'm trying to spend a bit less time online. And yeah, I think the kind of sewer that Twitter has become is getting kind of handy for that. Because it just is a very, very bizarre place where a lot of these conversations happen. And yeah, many years ago, I put a hard rule on myself that I never argue on the internet, and it's only ever served me well.
You stuck to it?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. You're an inspiration.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know. I've got a quick temper, so I've probably frayed a couple of times, but yeah, there's just no good comes from arguing on social media.
I try to show a lot of patience in the Facebook pages that I moderate, but every now and then I crack, I must admit. It's, first correspondence from Daniel. Noted in the last podcast, I used the phrase, the Hunter Biden impeachment inquiry, which is my pet hate. I can't believe I did that. Obviously, you would think it's the Hunter Biden impeachment inquiry, but it's actually the Joe Biden impeachment inquiry, which they're trying to make about Hunter Biden. It's a very telling mistake that even when I'm making that mistake, that's how it's coming across. But I just wanted to note that. That's a great pickup. Let's stop doing that. A lot of correspondence about Assange. I obviously had an hour-long interview with Felicity Ruby about Assange in the end of the last podcast. It was actually a really great debate. A lot of comments from all sides of the issue in the comments. I was really happy with the standard of discussion. It wasn't personal. It wasn't nasty. I think pretty much everyone thinks it's time for him to be freed, either now or soon. But where the different views was about his blameworthiness, whether he was, whether he should be treated like a hero or whether he's a naughty boy. And different people have different views for different reasons. One person, Peter, had a concern with the suggestion that this will open the floodgates to government overreach where laws extend to anyone, anywhere across the world, which is one of the points that Felicity made. And he made the point that America and other countries regularly extradite non-citizens for crimes committed elsewhere. And he cited an Australian man who was extradited to the USA and sentenced to 8 years in 2022 for fraud and money laundering committed while in Australia. I thought that was a fair point. The reason I brought it up here was just to note as well that this has actually been an issue in America since the early 19th century. And there was a really, really good podcast about this a few years back, which I'd recommend if you're interested in this topic. It's from the More Perfect series, which More Perfect was the legal offshoot of Radiolab for a while there. And it's about this particular podcast. I'll put in the blurb once again in the homework. You can go have a look. It's about the alien tort statute, which is an ancient law in America. And it followed someone in the 80s trying to find justice in an American court for a guy who killed her brother back in Paraguay. And then both of them ended up in America as immigrants. And then she tried to sue him in America for what he did back in Paraguay. And it's a really interesting area, but it's always very controversial. So yeah, like I wrote online in response to this guy, this issue did not begin with Assange and it won't end with Assange. It's a perennial in America, how much the courts want to be busybodies into other people's business. But anyway, so there's that as well. If you have anything to say about any of these correspondences, just jump in, Elle. But I'm just rattling through them to get to the content.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Keep rolling.
Another correspondence about the language. This is a popular one. 8 Sin San last week was she pled for us to not swear because she said that she was going to get fired from work, and a lot of people aren't happy about that. A lot of people pointing out that headphones exist, as I am currently showcasing. But I'm not going to say that. I disagree with them. I think you should ignore headphones because I don't want you to cut my listenership in half. Neil and TSG and all these people pointing out headphones. No, I want her whole office to listen to PEP. Okay, so back off. Matthew said, as I am a time-poor parent, I often listen to PEP while shuttling the kids around. My 6-year-old loves telling me off every time she hears Chaz or Dave swear. Even though I am regularly reprimanded for your swearing, it adds authenticity to the podcast, and I'm happy to pay the price for it. I thought that was lovely. And I'm going to tell my wife the exact same thing next time she reprimands me for all the swear words I've taught our children. I'm going to say I'm just showing them authenticity, and they are now more authentic as a result. So thank you for that talking point, Matthew. Mick Flipplenips says, please don't cut out the swearing. It's all natural and never forced. So I think it's totally fine. Plus it makes me smile. I'm only reading that out because rather than working in swear words, I prefer to work in the phrase Mick Flipplenips. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to pass it on to Dave, and we're going to work out a way to work that in as much as possible. And that will be contrived and not at all authentic. Correspondence about Putin and NATO. A few people wrote in to talk about that. I discussed that Putin in his interview, which we're going to discuss in a second, brought up the idea of Russia wanting to be part of NATO. And I said, if Bill Clinton actually turned out, I said, first of all, I don't know if Putin's telling the truth. That's a big if. But if he is telling the truth, if Clinton turned that down, that was a mistake because I thought it would have been great for Russia to be part of NATO for world political stability. Anyway, I got sent a whole bunch of resources on this. A lot of people were looking this up. Kevin said that membership for NATO is by application. Putin did not apply, nor had any interest in applying. He just talked about it. And he quoted a Guardian article, which I'll read out a bit here. George Robertson, a former Labor Defence Secretary who led NATO between 1999 and 2003, said Putin made it clear at their first meeting that he wanted Russia to be part of Western Europe. They wanted to be part of that secure, stable, prosperous West that Russia was out of at the time, he said. The Labor peer recalled an early meeting with Putin, who became Russian president in 2000. Putin said, when are you going to invite us to join NATO? And Robertson said, well, we don't invite people to join NATO. They apply to join NATO. And he said, well, we're not standing in line with a lot of countries that don't matter. And then later on in the same article, it says the account chimes with what Putin told the late David Frost in a BBC interview shortly before he was first inaugurated as Russian president, more than 21 years ago. Putin told Frost he would not rule out joining NATO, quote, if and when Russia's views are taken into account and as those of an equal partner. Now, you can interpret that however you wish. I'll just pass that on because I thought that was interesting. And also correspondence on the missing 20 minutes from the last ep. Because on Twitter, I tweeted out the fact, and you know this, Elle, because I was talking to you at the time, teeing up this podcast, that I made the last pod with the hour-long interview about Julian Assange and pushed it over to 3 hours 20. And I had to cut 20 minutes out because I discovered to my horror that literally the ABC will not deal with. I knew the ABC was a bit dodgy past the high twos, but I didn't realize literally 3 hours and 1 second it stops allowing me to export the podcast. So I was there frantically snipping and cutting away 20 minutes worth. And someone asked for the Fat City Architect asked, I'm up for a deleted scenes catch up of the hacked out 20 minutes. Anyone else interested? And I thought this is very exciting. It sounds like the missing 4 minutes of the Nixon tapes, which is very exciting to me. But I don't think it's necessary because I'm just going to work it in Like, as if I'm going to burn content. You know me, I'm obsessive. I'm just gonna work it in I'm gonna work in a bit today. I'll work in a bit next time. Though you'll hear it. Don't worry. Except for the really crap.
The PEP bootleg tapes.
Would you listen to them, Elle?
I mean, there's only so many hours in the day.
There'd be a lot of bootlegs.
Just back on the Putin Clinton thing. I always heard, I don't think it was ever confirmed, but there was definitely, I think, maybe some back channel talks or something. It always seems to have been hinted at. Because at the time, Putin was very keen on sort of saying, oh, Islam is the big menace, because he was obviously dealing with the Chechen rebels. And there was the apartment block bombings when he first came to power that it's sort of always been rumored that they were a false flag operation so that he had pretense to crack down on Chechens and stuff. So it really was at the time that they were looking to sort of form a new alliance and say, hey, the Islam in the Middle East is the problem. And I believe that Putin was the first person to call George Bush after 9/11. Oh. And sort of say, hey, we've been dealing with these kind of problem as well for a while. I mean, now apparently for Syria and a lot of the wars in the Middle East, the FSB sort of had an open door policy to let a lot of these guys go out of the country. To a lot of the Chechen fighters and stuff go to the Middle East. So they. Yeah, there's a lot of conniving going on, I think, there, but I do think there was some movement afoot in Russia, definitely, to to sort of work with the West more. And I mean, they consider themselves more, they look to the West rather than to Asia, and they certainly prefer, I think, culturally, Moscow does at least to look west.
Yeah, I given what you were just saying, I'm actually surprised a little bit that they didn't. Potentially, I mean, I know they were probably sick of Afghanistan by this point in time, but they could have offered a token presence in Afghanistan at that point in time, given, as you say, they were trying to present the common front against the Muslim world. That would have been an easy way for them to ingratiate themselves potentially on the way to being part of NATO. But
I mean, Afghanistan, I think, still sends a shiver down the spine of a lot of people in Russia because of the amount of grief it caused them. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Anyway, I've talked enough. Now, we spent 20 minutes, half an hour talking about the Alabama IVF stuff last podcast with Dr. Dave, but that was the first thing that you said that you had some thoughts about. Now, you've heard what we talked about. I'm just interested, are there other things that you'd like to add to this topic? Obviously, it's also progressed a little bit since we last talked about it anyway. So what are your thoughts about the Alabama IVF section? Anything that you'd like to say?
I mean, look, I think you guys covered it really well, and we actually spoke before I listened to the episode. So, I thought you guys covered it really well. I guess there's just some interesting stuff has been uncovered by some people that I know quite well in my line of writing about the religious right. And it seems that the judge, who you read out some of his legal wording around the Bible, yes. And it was quite bizarre. And it sort of sounds antiquated, but he's quite involved with the New Apostolic Reformation, which is a part, sort of a leadership group, but they're not a formal organization within Pentecostalism that Dave and I often talk about. And they do some pretty extreme things, like they do the Watchman Decree, and they're getting sort of quite sort of flirting with a lot of Christian dominionism and Christian supremacy, and he's been very actively involved in those sorts of groups. So I think it's very interesting that. I mean, obviously, some of these people, I think, are, just sort of taking it and going too far. And you see that, Trump is clearly very uncomfortable with it. He's, apparently always privately said that he thinks all this abortion stuff is a disaster. And you saw the speech he gave at the weekend. I saw some reporters that were there saying that he was very carefully reading off an auto cue. And so they are obviously very, very spooked by this, and rightly so, because this is the kind of issue that just reaches so far beyond partisan lines. And it's just patently insane.
Yeah, if I've got his quote right here, actually. Undoubtedly tweeted word for word with according to the card in front of his face as well. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. Today, I'm calling on the Alabama legislature to act quickly to find an immediate solution to preserve the availability of IVF in Alabama. The Republican Party should always be on the side of miracle of life and the side of mothers, fathers, and their beautiful babies. IVF is an important part of that, and our great Republican Party will always be with you in your quest for the ultimate joy in life. In caps.
Doesn't he hate his children?
I'm sure he's not talking about Eric when he says that. But just imagine him at the hospital with a mask on, just going, ultimate joy in life.
Yeah, it's normally only generals that are beautiful. So it's good to know that babies can be beautiful in Trump's magic world as well.
Dogs are beautiful as well when they're savaging terrorists as well. It's, I'm not sure if you've ever seen
I get a feeling he wouldn't. Yeah, I get a feeling he wouldn't be a dog guy.
No, he's not a dog guy generally, but I mean, I know this well because Shane Gillis is one of my favorite comedians. And he's got a special where he basically just performs Trump when he had, was it Soleimani, the terrorist killed, and there were dogs there, and like the very first thing Trump says when he comes out, he talks about the beautiful dogs that savaged him. Anyway, so Trump was as you say, he couldn't support IVF hard enough, and neither could Mike Pence. He's come out and supporting it. If Mike Pence is doing it, man, that is the top 1% of religiosity there. The best though was, do you see Tommy Tuberville's support for this?
It was at the 3 minutes where he took he took 3 positions somehow.
Yes,
on the
that's the one. That's the one.
Yes.
I'll play it for everyone else.
Do you have a reaction to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling on the fact that embryos are children?
Yeah, I was all for it. You just got to look at everything going on in the country. It's just attack on families, attack on kids. Anything that we can do for the future of our young people, because they're our number one commodity. We need to have more kids. We need to have an opportunity to do that. And I thought this was the right thing to do. But
IVF is used to have more children, and right now IVF services are paused at some of the clinics in Alabama. Aren't you concerned that this could impact people who are trying to have kids?
Well, that's for another conversation. I think the big thing is right now you go back to the situation and try to work it out to where it's best for everybody. I mean, that's what the whole abortion issue is about. So
but this really isn't about abortion. It's about IVF and the concern that now families might not have access to it.
But it's about the same direction. But I agree. But people need to have access. People need to have. We need more kids. We need the people to have the opportunity to have kids. I'd have to look at the entire bill and how it's written. I have not seen it.
Supreme Court decision.
Well, I know that, but I'd have to look. I haven't looked at it. But this is state issue.
Women aren't going to be able to have IVF treatments already in some places.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
What do you say to them?
Unfortunate.
Unfortunate. Would alienate swing voters in the general election?
I don't know. It might some, but you don't hear a lot of talk about it. I mean, you don't. That's not a big conversation.
Well, it's a conversation now, and IVF is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Families across the board use it. What is your message to the Supreme Court if this does in fact stop families from being able to use IVF?
Well, we don't need that.
I did take notes when I watched that. He's all for calling embryos children because you've just got to look what's going on in the country. But IVF clinics shutting down is another conversation. You got to look what's best for everybody, Elle, which is what abortion is about. But that's not this. But people need to be able to have more kids. And he's got to look at the legislation, which doesn't exist. And it's unfortunate that women aren't going to be able to have IVF. And he would tell them that they're unfortunate. But you don't hear much talk about this kind of thing. And we don't need the Supreme Court stopping families from using IVF. Okay, so that's a basic summary of his argument. I actually drew a flow chart because I thought it'd be a funny diagram. It ended up being like a fly buzzing all over the place. It was very difficult to follow. But anyway, so yes, they are having trouble. And as you say, there is a good reason. I'm not sure if you saw this, but apparently Kellyanne Conway shared polling with House Republicans in December about this that showed 90% of Americans support IVF treatment, including supermajorities of evangelical Christians and anti-abortion voters.
Of course.
Yeah.
And just a bizarre thing. I mean, I know that a lot of there's a lot of political positions that get taken that are often in conflict with others. But you see how much of that great replacement stuff is going on the right at the moment, and a lot of the the border debate is about they're bringing in people to pump up the Democrat vote. You would think that this that it would the nativist argument would run to saying that we can, have more children of our own in here, and that there'd be quite a lot of people getting behind that. So,
the problem for them though, I think, and I understand this, the problem is not a misunderstanding of their position. The problem is that not only is their fundamental ideology in conflict with IVF, like it just is, but on top of that, on a logical level, they should be against IVF. I'm talking about pro-lifers here. But on a surface level, the argument is the direct opposite, in that the surface argument, the really obvious Fox News argument is, hang on, if you're pro-life, shouldn't you be in favor of more babies? Which is that's the Trump argument, right? That's a simple argument anyone can get. But the real logical argument is actually the opposite. And this really ties them in knots and this drives a truck through the fissures in their ideology. Because if you believe life begins at conception and you must never take that life, then the Alabama Supreme Court is absolutely right. Like, those embryos are people. And when you drop the tray, you're a mass murderer. That is their actual ideology. And if you create an exception and say, you know what, a fertilized egg is a person, but not when it's in a tray, then you go, okay, well, how does that work? Why isn't it a person? Why is it a person when it's inside a womb, but it's not a person when it's inside a tray? Like, you don't stop being a person because you're standing in a different room. How does that work? So that's, I think, their problem, that it actually brings out the contradictions in their own logic.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think it's that that taking all of this anti-abortion stuff to its logical conclusion keeps getting them tied in knots, because this was never about, abortion. Jerry Falwell quite famously came out after the Roe v. Wade ruling and was like, yeah, it's great. This is weirdo Catholic stuff, all this anti-abortion. And then just got on board with Paul Weyrich and the sort of that kind of think tank world that was really getting going about that time, because they were in opposition to busing and tax exemptions for sort of, segregated schools. So it was really, it's never actually really been about this, but obviously sort of the newer generation is taking it on board and taking it to its logical conclusion. I recall a few years ago, Kevin D. Williamson, he's a writer, I think, for National Review or one of those.
Now he writes for Dispatch. But yeah, he used to be in National Review. Then he went to Atlantic and got the sack after literally one day. And now he writes at the Dispatch.
Yeah, was that because, because he wound up saying that women who get abortions should face the death penalty.
Yes.
For murder.
Right.
And it was, and so he took it to its logical conclusion. And it's like, well, if you genuinely believe that you should argue that. But no one ever wants to go that far, because obviously they know that it's never going to get them anywhere. So it's just obviously an issue that keeps tying the Republicans in knots.
And just to be fair, by the way, to Kevin Williamson, not that anyone cares, when he was making that argument, he wasn't actually sitting there going, I believe all these women should go to jail for murder. He was saying making the argument you just made, except for he was saying it's something he believes, that he believes in life. But he says, I realize that the logical conclusion of that is this. And then he got himself into a lot of strife, because Kevin Williamson is not subtle in the way he writes articles. He's a bit of a sledgehammer. Anyway, I think this really is brought out, and there's a real issue, I think, with Republicans in Congress, because a lot of them have been pushing this bill for years now, called the Life at Conception Act. And take, say, Congressional Rep Michelle Steele. She said, as someone who struggled to get pregnant, I believe all life is a gift. IVF allowed me, as it has so many others, to start my family. I believe there's nothing more pro-life than helping families have children. I do not support federal restrictions on IVF. She used it herself. That's what she says. She co-sponsored the Life at Conception Act, which establishes life beginning at fertilization. It defines human being as including all stages of life, including the moment of fertilization, cloning, or other moment at which an individual member of the human species comes into being, which is a very specific definition when you think about it. So specific, it's like it occurred to them, the idea of IVF. Like, that's not an accident, that definition. And I'll tell you how I know it's not an accident. And by the way, 166 Republicans co-sponsored that in 2021, 125 of them co-sponsored it in 2023. Let me tell you how I know it's not an accident. Because the previous version of that bill back in 2017, sponsored by Rand Paul, specifically excluded IVF. They actually excluded it. Then they dropped the exclusion in the new version, and they worded it as broadly as possible to clearly include IVF. So that's not a mistake. And this is after Dobbs as well. This is 2023. This is after Dobbs. So they knew at that stage it wasn't purely academic. So they got a problem. And the 125 people, congressional reps, who co-sponsored that can look forward to some hella good attack ads in the election campaign coming up, because it's a legitimate issue now, and they've just signed their own death warrant as far as this is concerned. And they can try and backflip as much as they like, but they've co-sponsored the legislation, which specifically is about IVF. So they've got a problem there, I think. Do you have anything else to say about this area?
No, look, I think this is going to be rolling on for a while, and obviously it's the kind of thing that the Democrats can grab onto, and they, as I think we might discuss later on, they're kind of, they need an issue, they need something to fortify their base right now. So I think we'll be hearing a lot more about it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I did mention at the last podcast, I was saying there's no doubt that the Alabama Supreme Court were not trying to outlaw IVF, regardless of the Republican legislation, the Supreme Court were definitely trying to work their way around IVF. And I said, well, what's probably going to happen is there'll just be some Alabama legislation to overrule it, which is in fact what Trump called for as well. So it's one of the very few times me and Trump are in simpatico. But I just want to point out, it's been like a week now since that ruling came down. There's no legislation in Alabama so far. The only legislation was from the Republicans. The only legislation so far has been from a Democrat, which from Anthony Daniels, who had a bill that established that any fertilized human egg or human embryo that exists outside of a human uterus is not considered an unborn child or human being for any purpose under state law. And so far that has 0 Republican co-sponsors. So it's an interesting development. We'll have to follow that one, I think. Oh, one other thought in this area. Sorry, you're about to say something else?
Oh no, I was just about to say we move a bit slowly in the South, but it does sound like they're probably putting together some sort of national thing. They're not just going to leave this up to Kay Ivey to sort out. I think they've got to work out something that everyone can get on board with. And like you said, the polling's pretty disastrous. So I just think that they're actually just kind of doing their homework.
Fair enough. I just wanted to have one more thought about this as well, which is that while I think the vast majority of Republicans right now are hitting the reverse, beep, 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 looking over their shoulder, trying to get out of here as fast as they can, there are one or two that aren't, and they're interesting, to me at least. There's a guy called Christopher Rufo, who I'm sure you're familiar with. I don't know if the Peppers are. He's essentially Ron DeSantis's chief enforcer. he's like the capo of the culture war. How are you describing?
Yeah. I was about to say that he's the chief culture warrior. He kicked off the whole Roxane Gay DEI Harvard thing that Bill Ackman then grabbed onto. And I know my friend Jason Wilson, who's Australian originally, but who lives in Portland and does a lot of reporting for The Guardian on the far right. He has recently run a couple of stories on Rufo and has reached out for him for comment and has been sent unpublishable things in return. So he's nice guy.
Oh yeah, he didn't approach him with Christian cheer.
No.
Okay. Look, the reason I bring him up is because there was a clip tweeted out by some lefties essentially saying, "Oh, hey, when this was in the news, hey, Heritage Foundation, remember when you said this back in 2023?" And they play the clip of a lady, I think, and this was originally tweeted out by the Heritage Foundation. I can only describe this as a lady arguing against standard recreational sex. And I'll play it to you, see what you think, and then we'll talk about Christopher Rufo.
I hear from a great many young women who were put on the pill at the age of 14 and came off it, so maybe 10 years later, and realized they'd done a complete personality flip, and actually they, I was, one said, and I quote, I thought I was bipolar. But then it turned out actually it was just this psychoactive substance that I'd been. What were they doing to me? And this is all, and this was all to the purpose of rendering a woman receptive to what is for the most part loveless and sometimes extremely degrading sexual access. And I struggle to see in what way that's in women's interests. And given the great many other things that to my eye are downstream of the entry into that paradigm, it seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill, and for rewilding sex, returning the danger to sex, returning the intimacy, and really the consequentiality to sex.
Did you ever think you would see people talking like this in the future outside some dystopian fictional TV show? Yeah, I mean, first of all, do you have a response to that? I imagine you probably do.
It is interesting. It kind of does tap a bit with some stuff that I've seen. I follow some interesting sort of health, like very Californian kind of health influences and stuff like that. And you're seeing a lot of like they're all really against the pill now. And it's a bit of a weird thing. So you do sometimes see these bizarre crossovers, but I don't know. Once again, I think it's just these kind of groups sort of wind up having to take the sort of arguments they're making to their logical extension, which normal people just find creepy and weird. And how much, I mean, I'm just not sure how much of this stuff kind of seeps out of the online ecosystem, how much of this is just for weirdos like you and me who spend far too much time on the internet. But yeah, it is, it's weird.
Well, look, I wasn't going to talk about this. Normally, I would just see that and just go, oh, yeah, whatever, and just flick on. I'm like, yeah, there's lots of crazy people out there saying crazy things. By the way, just so we don't leave it unrebutted, I know it goes without saying there's a lot of women who watch this who would know this already without me pointing this out, but just for some guys who might not know a woman, women use the pill for a lot of reasons. It's not just for contraceptive purposes. Okay, there's some
people have to use it for migraines and things like that. So
acne, whatever. There's a lot of reasons why you might use the pill. Secondly, there are about 100 pills. There are so many different pills. Everyone knows a pill that a particular woman can't take, so then she takes a different pill, and then she tries a different pill. And you know what? If she can't take any pills, and I know some women who can't take any of the pills, then she won't take the pill. But the fact is that for most women, there is a pill they can take, and then it's up to them. If they want to take it, they can take it. You don't need to rewild sex for the whole of the world because of this one anecdote. But the reason I bring this up is because Christopher Rufo, our old friend, when a lefty tweeted out about, oh, look at this, the righties are going off against recreational sex, this is how he responded. So what? The pill causes health problems for many women. Recreational sex is a large part of the reason we have so many single mother households, which drives poverty, crime, and dysfunction. The point of sex is to create children. This is natural, normal, and good. That guy is not a rando. That guy is extremely powerful in that part of the culture. He is one of the preeminent people in the culture war, and that's his position. And like, if he's running that line, we're going to hear about this again. Now, I'm not saying that, if you vote Republican in 2024, they're going to ban sex. I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm just saying in terms of this chapter of the culture war, like, if Christopher Rufo is saying that shit in the open, that you will hear that again. I promise you. So I just wanted to flag that. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of have a bit of an echo of the old welfare queens line that you could see them, it's sort of the nativism stuff that we were talking about earlier, but you could see them saying that this is, breeding new people for welfare and all that kind of stuff. You can see how they'd connect the dots there. So yeah, but I mean, you're right. Rufo is he's very good at what he does, and he's very energetic, and he sort of seems to have the ear of people and the ability to pull all sorts of people into his orbit. So yeah, I think you're right. I think we will definitely be hearing about it again.
Yep, he's got a real totalitarian vibe about him as well, which bothers me somewhat. These guys want to control everything. Anyway, let's move on to the the big area, which is all the Tucker Carlson Russia stuff. Now, I didn't get the Tucker last week. I immediately wanted to turn lemons into lemonade because I thought, I know you know more about Putin and Navalny than me and Dave put together. So rather than us just waffling on and having no idea what we're talking about, I really wanted your view on some of this stuff. So, okay, let's start with the Putin interview. First of all, what are your thoughts about Tucker Carlson interviewing Putin at all in the first place? Because it was controversial for a little while there, for a couple of days beforehand when we announced it. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. He's the first Westerner to have interviewed Putin since the Ukraine invasion. And I know Steve Rosenberg, who's a really great journalist for the BBC, who's still living in Russia, which is quite brave. He's been, trying to get interviews, and he's fluent in Russian. Quite a few other people have tried, and obviously there was a reason why he gave it to Tucker Carlson. And I think Tucker Carlson sort of giggling like a schoolgirl within about 5 minutes sort of made it pretty clear why Carlson got the gig.
Well, according to Tucker Carlson, it's because no one else could have been bothered to interview Vladimir Putin.
For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning PEP sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin.
Well, yeah, I mean, most Western Russia journalists have left the country now. Evan Gerskovich is still behind bars, and I've got a few friends that sort of had to leave quite quickly for fear of something like that happening to them. So yeah, I mean, Tucker's obviously he was the right guy for the job, and if you look, I've got to be honest. I'm a bad journalist. I couldn't sit through the whole 2 hours. It was so boring.
How much?
It was so boring. Look, the history lesson was I sort of skipped through parts of that. The half an hour when he goes, back in 862 when the Scandinavian prince comes over and all of that. So I just kind of watched the highlights and kind of skipped through the various parts. And I mean, to be honest, I was more interested in Carlson's reactions, which Jon Stewart had a great line. Speaking, of course, to power. Because Tucker said, of course, about when Putin said that Poland collaborated with Hitler in World War II. And Tucker just said, oh, of course. So yeah, but I mean, look, it was fairly standard Putin stuff. He does a couple of annual speeches, which can just go on for hours and hours and hours. He sort of does an annual television call-in program where, they obviously, it's very staged, and you sort of have, what's that Lisa Simpson line to Mr. Burns when he runs for president? You have the popularity of a runaway freight train. Why are you so successful, or something like that? Yeah. So Putin sort of gets those questions, and this was classic Putin. He does this. He likes going off on his tangents. He loves going back into history. He's obsessed with going back into history. This is what he normally does. And I mean, there was clearly a bit of I think Putin likes to show his character. And he's someone who he made it to the top of St. Petersburg in the 90s. He sort of scrapped his way up there from really being something of a nobody. And to make it to the top of St. Petersburg, which was just, the epicenter of crime, people constantly being shot in the streets, you've got to be pretty good at putting your dick on the table. Apologies for swearing. You've got to be a pretty good bully. You've got to not really care about what anyone else says. And this is quite, I don't know, to my mind, it was quite obviously a display from him of saying, I'm going to get this, sort of sycophantic American over here, and I'm going to talk to him, answer his questions in half an hour blocks at a time, saying exactly what I want, because I can. And so, yeah, it seemed like as much a kind of display of his power and influence as anything else. And obviously he kept saying that it was geared towards Russians, but it was very clearly geared towards Americans, while they're, voting on the while the bills in Congress that they're, trying to send more money to Ukraine, while the American election is gearing up. This was very, very clearly aimed at the United States.
Okay, so if he had complete control of the interview and he was trying to communicate to the United States, what was he trying to tell the United States?
Again, I really think it's probably more of a character thing, just sort of saying that, I'm the big dog and I do what I want. And I mean, just still that the ongoing justification. I mean, he truly believes in everything that he says about the Ukraine, about the historical claims, about that they were right to invade, that there's a neo-Nazi problem. And he's just very clearly speaking to, sort of a growing segment of American conservatives who see Russia as, sort of a bastion of traditional values, of Christianity, of the, the last kind of great hope, I suppose, for that method of thinking. So, and I think obviously just to put some spokes in the wheels of Congress while all of this Ukraine funding stuff comes up, it's obviously going to be a pretty big election issue. People, on the right of the Republican Party are making it more and more of a thing. And Putin's a magnificent troll. He loves just kind of, he loves just interfering and causing chaos. He's not the sort of great master of the universe, as I think he's often sort of made out by liberals and people on the left. He's just a very good troll and very good at causing chaos. And he does things like these in the I think there was the Czech, what is it, Czechia now, their election a few years ago, just, released some secret tapes sort of on the eve of the election just to cause some chaos of some ministers speaking off the record and things like that. So this is what he likes to do with elections, is just chuck as much shit there as he can and see what sticks.
So do you think the trolling thing might be why he brought up Tucker's CIA past?
Yet the armed opposition committed a coup in Kiev. What is that supposed to mean? Who do you think you are? I wanted to ask the then US leadership.
With the backing of whom?
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand.
When I saw that, I just thought, why is he doing that? Like Tucker's his buddy. Why is he trying to get under Tucker's skin? So do you think he just can't help himself trolling people? Or do you think he was trying to put Tucker in his place just to make sure?
I think a bit of both. Like I said, he obviously likes to show that he's the big dog. And, he came, there is also sort of a bit of a weird culture in very elite Russian circles. It's always been there of a real thing of sort of bastardization, that you sort of really bully your way to the top. Some of the stuff with Gorbachev and Yeltsin that was going on when the USSR was falling apart, just constantly trying to humiliate each other in front of other people. This is, to sort of say that, I'm the biggest dog here. So I think it's a bit of that, and just to, show, I guess, maybe try and show that it wasn't so staged. What was that thing early on where he said to Tucker, is this a talk show or is this a serious conversation? And Tucker just started giggling like a schoolgirl. Yeah. I think he was, probably trying to show that it wasn't completely stage managed. But then, how much of that sort of off the cuff stuff was really off the cuff and a bit stage managed. It's hard to say.
Okay, let me put I'll take a little bit of time to get to it, but let me put a different point of view to you and see what you think of this. Which is, okay, first of all, like, there's no doubt Tucker Carlson was, as you say, their selected person to speak to. Unlike what Tucker Carlson said in that clip I played before, heaps of people want to interview Putin. Lots of people would love to interview him. They have to go to Russia to do it. They can do it through Zoom. They can do it through satellite. They'd love to interview Putin. The Kremlin spokesperson, Peskov, like literally the next day after Tucker Carlson put out that release, humiliated him by saying, Mr. Carlson is wrong. We receive many requests for interviews with the president. When it comes to the countries of the collective West, we receive requests from large network media, traditional TV channels, and large newspapers, which can in no way boast of trying to at least look impartial in terms of covering what's going on. So essentially, he's admitting that Tucker is their poodle, which I would have thought would be embarrassing to Tucker. But and then you've got like in 2022, Mother Jones leaked some, well, they got a hold of some leaked Kremlin talking points that were specifically about Tucker Carlson, which I'll read out to you. It's essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from the leadership of the Western countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally. Russia is only protecting its interests. It sums up Carlson's position as Russia is only protecting its interests and security. The memo includes a quote from Carlson, and how would the US behave if such a situation developed in neighboring Mexico or Canada? So these are talking points from the Kremlin saying he's our guy, right? But I do have a certain amount of sympathy for like people saying, he was just a pushover, he wasn't confrontational, all the rest of it. I know when I conduct interviews, and I'm no pro interviewer, but I know when I conduct interviews, I prefer to not have confrontational interviews. I prefer to just put questions to people that are usually the questions that the other side would ask, and then let them answer them. And then just ask them another question. Even if I know what they're saying is bullshit, I won't correct them. I'll just then ask them another question. I know I can correct them at any other point in my TV show when I want to. But I figure interview time is time to hear from them and time to get their point of view. And otherwise, what's the point of talking to them? I can just do analysis by myself. I don't need them unless I want to hear their point of view. So that's the way I approach interviews. And I've got no problems with Tucker sitting there and nodding and saying, of course, of course, of course. If he's asking interesting questions that elicit responses from Putin, he's at least getting him on the record, which I think is a valuable function for a world leader. And Tucker Carlson himself reflected on this a couple of days later. He was in Dubai at the kind of world conference that Tucker Carlson isn't supposed to go to. And he was talking about his interview, and this is what he said.
I went because I felt that most Americans in whose name all of this is being done don't really know what's happening, and they know nothing about the guy they're supposedly at war with unofficially. And I just felt that my job, if I have a job in this world, is to bring information to people so they can decide. And so I wanted to do the longest interview I could with Vladimir Putin that contained the most amount of Vladimir Putin talking, not me grandstanding about what a great person I am. When an American journalist interviews someone like Vladimir Putin, the whole point of the interview is to say, I'm a good person and you're not. And that interview was aimed at his colleagues in the newsrooms in the United States. I'm a good person. Why are you such a bad person? You're committing genocide. Okay. That's not fruitful, and that's certainly not my role. I care what God thinks of me, what my wife thinks of me, and what my 4 children think of me, and that's all I care about. So I don't need to prove that I'm a good person. I want to hear Vladimir Putin talk so people in my country can assess what's happening.
Okay, he's got a bit of attitude there, but so what do you think of that point of view? That his job is to just get answers from Vladimir Putin?
I think that is acceptable in some ways. And like you said, I'm not a hugely adversarial person either. When I interview people, I don't think it's particularly fruitful. And it would be fine, but obviously, I think the next point that we're going to get onto is that the way that he allowed himself to be paraded around Russia. So there was a lot of the supermarket stuff, and that was Russian media was picking up on everything he did, on everything that he said, and all that kind of stuff. He was sort of like the Australian media is at the moment with Taylor Swift, just sort of crowbarring her into every story for SEO or whatever. In Russia, it was just, it was in all of the media, they were constantly running this stuff. And I think, it is a dereliction of duty as a journalist to allow yourself to be used like that. And believe it or not, I don't like to cast aspersions on people's sincerity, but on Tucker Carlson in this case, I'm yeah, I think we might be able to say that he's perhaps not being entirely sincere.
I'm definitely, we're obviously about to move into that part of the trip, and I've got a lot to say about that. My view on that is a lot less generous than my view is on the interview. But I want to say, I want to ask you two things more about the interview before we move on to the propaganda tour. The first thing is, what did you think about the Evan Gershkovich section? Because, I mean, obviously Tucker was saving his pushing back for the end. He was obviously thinking to himself, and look, once again, I can understand this. Yep. There's every chance
that's what I do as well. Yeah.
Yeah. There's every chance Putin could walk out of this interview. Like, that's the kind of dick swinging thing he would do. So if he starts in the first 5 minutes, saying some confrontational, and then Putin destroys his interview, what's he got then? So I get that. Save him till the end. And I mean, I'll play it for everyone. I won't play the whole lot because it went for about 6 minutes. I'll play bits and pieces of pushback from Tucker Carlson to show that I think he actually did push back in this section.
I believe an agreement can be reached.
So typically, I mean, this stuff has happened for obviously centuries. One country catches another spy within its borders, it trades it for one of its own intel guys in another country. I think what makes, and it's not my business, but what makes this different is the guy's obviously not a spy, he's a kid. And maybe he was breaking your law in some way, but he's not a super spy, and everybody knows that. And he's being held hostage in exchange, which is true. With respect, it's true, and everyone knows it's true. So maybe he's in a different category. Maybe it's not fair to ask for, somebody else in exchange for letting him out. Maybe it degrades Russia to do that.
Вы знаете, можно как угодно говорить, что такое шпион, что не шпион.
You can give different interpretations to what constitutes a spy, but there are certain things provided by law. If person gets secret information and does that in conspiratorial manner, then this is qualified as espionage. And that is exactly what he was doing. He was receiving classified, confidential information, and he did it covertly. Maybe he did that out of carelessness or his own initiative. Considering the sheer fact, this is qualified as espionage. The fact has been proven, as he was caught red-handed when he was receiving this information. If it had been some far-fetched excuse, some fabrication, something not proven, it would have been a different story then. But he was caught red-handed when he was secretly getting confidential information. What is it then?
But are you suggesting that he was working for the US government or NATO, or he was just a reporter who was given material he wasn't supposed to have? Those seem like very different things.
Я не знаю, на кого он работал.
I don't know who he was working for, but I would like to reiterate that getting classified information in secret is called espionage. And let me tell you a story about a person serving a sentence in an allied country of the US. That person, due to patriotic sentiments, eliminated a bandit in one of the European capitals. Whether he did it of his own volition or not, that is a different question.
Yeah, but Evan Gershkovich didn't do that. I mean, that's a completely different. I mean, this is a 32-year-old newspaper reporter.
He committed something different. He's not just a journalist. I reiterate, he's a journalist who was secretly giving confidential information.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to know how, if that was prearranged, if there was some sort of vetting of questions. But I mean, surely, Putin would have expected it, and he had his response ready. And it is, once again, sort of classic Putin, St. Petersburg Mafia from the 90s. He is brilliant. His whole strategy has always been taking hostages. Mm-hmm. He's been doing it for years. He was taking, border guards from Estonia and things like that. And he's got a guy in mind that he wants back. And Gershkovich, I think he's always been safe in that he was clearly being taken as a hostage. But obviously it's pretty unpleasant. And as I think we'll get to, Navalny being murdered in prison this week is probably psychologically quite traumatizing for him. Yeah. But yeah, they're obviously, there would have been back channel conversations going on ever since Gershkovich was arrested. the fact that Putin wants someone so specifically, and the fact that America sort of hasn't given them up yet. The Brittany Griner deal was done a lot more quickly. So I'm guessing that this is quite contentious, or because he seems like the kind of guy that the Biden administration want to get back pretty quickly.
Well, I think it's not an accident that in that answer, which, as you said, was probably pre-prepared, he specifically mentioned someone who is currently in captivity in Germany that he thinks is wrongfully accused, and it's such an outrageous injustice. I think that's a pretty strong hint who he wants to be released. Not that necessarily America can make Germany release someone, but I got this strong sense that he was hinting what this is all about in that answer. But I was going to say one more thing about this, which is you can comment or not comment. I actually don't have a view about this, but I just want to share what I think is misinformation about this interview, which is there's been a lot of talk in the press about what Putin said afterwards about the interview, and about Putin calling Tucker Carlson soft and having a go at him. I noticed that a lot of articles had different quotes saying the same thing, but different words. And obviously it's from Russian, it's translation from Russian. So I just thought, well, I can't see any quotes saying the word soft. And the different quotes said different things. And so anyway, so I went hunting around the actual official Russian stations transcripts to find what they said he said. And even if he didn't say it, I imagine it's what he wanted to say, what's in the Russian transcript. So I look, and this is what they got. So, and I just want to read it to you because he didn't use the word soft. The interviewer used the word soft, which is not what Putin did. So I'll read it. The interviewer said, after all, Carlson was criticized immediately before the interview and after the interview. He is now accused of allegedly asking few tough questions. Allegedly, he was too soft with you, and you were very comfortable with him. Do you think you have crushed the American journalist with your authority? That's one of those questions you described before, those Lisa questions. And Putin responded with, I think that your Carlson, when I say your, I mean he's a representative of your journalistic community as you are, is a dangerous man. And here's why. Because to be honest, I thought that he would go aggressively and ask these so-called tough questions. I was not only ready for this, but I wanted it because it would give me the opportunity to respond just as sharply, which in my opinion would give a certain specificity to our entire conversation. But he chose a different tactic. He tried to interrupt me several times, but still, surprisingly for a Western journalist, he turned out to be patient and listened to my long dialogues, especially those related to history. Didn't give me a reason to do what I was ready for. Therefore, frankly speaking, I did not fully enjoy this interview, but he strictly followed his plan and he fulfilled his plan. But how meaningful it was in the end is not for me to judge. It is the viewers, listeners, or perhaps readers of the received interview who must draw their own conclusions. Now, you can believe that, you can not believe that, but if you take that at its face, he's actually expressing respect for Tucker Carlson's style. That's what he's doing right there, from what I read. But yeah, maybe it's bullshit. I don't know. What's your response?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, my Russian is no longer good enough to really translate. But I mean, I guess I would say that Peskov, who you mentioned earlier, Putin's comms guy, is very powerful, and he might have sort of set up this question, so it wasn't actually Putin saying it, but it was being said around that. But I mean, who knows? I try to make a hard rule again of not getting into Kremlinology because it's it gets pretty easy to do. And I think just probably kind of taking this on face value that it was kind of useful for both of them. Neither of them, probably covered themselves in glory. And this was really an exercise about outlining positions ahead of elections. So obviously the US election's later this year, but Russia has its election in 2 weeks. And spoiler alert, you're not going to believe who's going to win. But yeah, I think it's just just marking some lines in the sand.
Okay. Now let's get into the propaganda tour. I'm really interested as someone who, because I didn't really give you the big intro before because I assume people know who you are at this point in time, but Elle Hardy has been to every country on earth about 1 million times. She's a real foreign affairs journal. And so you know what you're talking about with this kind of stuff. When you see the propaganda tour, we'll go through video by video, but when you see that kind of stuff, generally, do you think that Tucker Carlson had to do that? Or do you think he had minders telling him what to do? or do you think it was part of the deal, or do you think he chose to do that off his own bat?
Again, it's really hard to say without knowing his actual sincerity. I suspect it was probably a part of the deal because like I said, the amount of play that it's been getting in the Russian media, his publicity tour does just feel like it was a bit of quid pro. Again, for Putin's election in a couple of weeks, just to say, look at this big, powerful American that I'm, stringing around the country. So yeah, I suspect there was probably some kind of deal, but I mean, Tucker was having a great time. The trolley, and the bread.
Yeah.
He
liked the bread.
He looks like he was having a good time. And look, Russian bread is fantastic, and American bread is terrible. So I do get his enthusiasm on that count. But yeah, I mean, look, he seemed to be enjoying it.
Okay, let's go video by video. Let's start with the subway video. So there's basically an infomercial about the Moscow metro here, and it's got all kinds of ornate classical music in the background. Now I'm going to play it in the background of our podcast now, just to lift the class of this joint. I feel like I need a pipe while that music's going. But now theoretically, in this video, he's trying to demonstrate that even though this train station was built by Stalin 80 years ago, it's still clean, it has no crime. And, I believe that. I believe that. It's we should actually just well, first of all, you give me your thoughts about the train video, and then I'll jump in with a bit more.
Well, look, again, he is right. The metro system is amazing, and some of those stations are very beautiful. I mean, obviously, again, they're very beautiful, but like anywhere in the world, you're probably going to see, around those metro stations, you do see a lot of drunks and drug addicts and stuff like that. It's not this not the perfect paradise that Tucker would make us believe, but the subway stations are fantastic. And once again, America just has dreadful public transport if it has it at all. So I'm thinking, maybe for a guy, I can't remember where he grew up, but maybe it is really just
San Francisco.
Oh gosh.
So,
well, yeah,
so it's not clean in San Francisco, I'm sure.
Woo, yeah, and I've used public transport in San Francisco, and it's not a great experience. So maybe some of the wonder and joy was genuine.
Yeah. Glenn Beck. I watched an interview between Tucker and Glenn Beck about this afterwards, and Glenn Beck pushed back a little bit on all this. Oh, look at this marvelous train station! Isn't it clean? Isn't there a lack of crime? And I just want to play what Tucker's response to Glenn Beck was, because I found it interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, there's not a lot of crime in North Korea either. There's no drug problem really in China, because you could just take them off the street and kill them.
But we didn't have that here. And yes. I'm only 54 and I remember it.
Okay.
It's not like you have to be a fascist to have an orderly society. We had one. And on Memorial Day 2020, with the drug OD of George Floyd, everything changed. And what we got was the intentional destruction of American cities. Now, I don't live in a city because I don't like them. But what I missed, because I don't live in one, is that you can't have a great country unless you have a great city, period, or a number of great cities. Cities define your country. That's not my choice. It's just a fact. It's always been true. And so if every one of your cities is a cesspool, then your country is collapsing. But they don't need to be that way. Crime is the easiest thing to fix. You say, we're just not putting up with this. We've done it before. I covered it. I wrote a book on it in 1994. I watched New York City go from a very dangerous place to one of the safest cities in the world. And it didn't take mass executions. No. It didn't even take mass incarceration. It just took paying attention to the details. If there's graffiti, wipe it off.
Let's just leave aside his theories about well, actually, no, let me ask you. You live in America. Are all of America's cities a cesspool?
I mean, look, the homelessness problem in California is obscene. It is just so sad. I mean, downtown LA is just probably at least 5 blocks by 5 blocks of homeless encampments. And, what is California is like, if it was a country, it'd be like the 6th wealthiest or something in the world. So it's pretty awful. And you can really see, I mean, I've been in America since 2016. definitely the homelessness is getting greater and greater. And I think I know a few weeks ago you mentioned that the Republicans are really going to make the election a referendum on Kamala Harris. And, where is Kamala Harris from? San Francisco. So that that has just been San Francisco is this, it used to be the stand-in for like liberal values. Now San Francisco is the stand-in for decay. So you just know what's coming down the pipeline there. But I mean, every now and then you sort of think, oh, Tucker isn't so unreasonable. And then he says stuff like the George Floyd drug overdose. And you remember that he's got a pretty good dog whistle.
He's got a very loud dog whistle.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just as a little aside, by the way, he's talking about. You can see he's really focusing on crime there. And he did focus on crime a lot with Glenn Beck. Crime might have gone up a little bit in 2021. It's gone down again since then. It's not quite as low as it was in 2019, but it's not far off. Let me tell you now, it is so much less than it was in the broken window period that Tucker Carlson is fantasizing about. It's like half, maybe a third of what it was back then. So I think someone might have some foggy memories of how things used to be.
I think there's I don't think it's ever been able to be proven, but there is a theory out there that big drop off in crime might have something to do with banning lead paint and lead petrol. And the lead in paint. So I don't know, but obviously, pulling out broken windows and I've just been reading a book on the history of the 70s in the United States, and just the crime in New York, it was really outrageous, and it's sort of always been a Republican talking point. I think they're obviously going back towards that, because I think there just is a general sense of decay. Like I said, I think you just see the kind of homelessness around, and there is a real effort on the right to correlate that with crime and disorder. And I think that there just is a, sort of a general feeling, there's been a lot of debate about, well, the economy is actually quite good. And, everyone should be seeing this, but you really just get the sense that things are a bit shabby, that things are a bit dilapidated, that they're, it's pretty hard to go past and overpass in the United States and not see a group of homeless people living underneath it. And I think that sense of just that something isn't quite right in the country, that there is a, sort of general decline going on, is probably, just the vibe, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah, look, I got to say, I haven't been to America since 2009, so I'm the last person that you should ask about this. You live there, but whenever I've been there in the past, admittedly 15 years ago or more, I'm always surprised by how rundown infrastructure is. Like, Australian infrastructure is just better. It's just better. It's cleaner and better. Maybe Tucker Carlson should come to Australia, but it's just I imagine from what I've read, infrastructure has only become more rundown in the last 15 years. But so I'm not saying that it's all beautiful. And by the way, the reason I played that clip was just to show that Tucker Carlson is not sticking to the authoritarian thing. Now he's back in America, like he's saying that it's not about Russia. This is about crime and stuff. And he actually made a point of this in an interview, saying you can go anywhere. You can go anywhere in the world. You can go to Abu Dhabi. You can go to other places, and they're not like America is. He was saying. So whatever. I mean, that's not my biggest problem. My biggest problem is coming up. But one more thing about the train thing. They ended off. I don't know if you saw this. They ended off on a plaque, a close-up of a plaque. That's like a plaque with Lenin's picture, with they didn't translate it. It was Russian writing. But apparently that plaque is a friendship plaque between Russia and Ukraine. And they ended up off longingly with this close-up of this Russian plaque. Now, no English speakers would have any clue what that was. But I don't believe that's a coincidence. I don't know why they would have done that. But it just seemed like just a kind of a trolly, kind of dickheady move that had to be intentional. Like, surely that's not an accident that they end off on this very slow close-up of a plaque that's about Ukraine-Russian friendship.
Yeah, like I said, Putin is a real troll, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. His speeches, sort of some of the annual speeches that I mentioned that he gives and the TV call in Russian, he's known for being like really ribald. Like he'll say like really sexually suggestive things, and he really likes just pushing the boundaries and pushing it to the edge. Which when he's all sort of buttoned up in his suit and sort of looking and in history professor mode, you mightn't see it, but he really is a troll par excellence, and always likes getting these little things in. So I'm with you. I strongly suspect that it was just a bit of maybe just a bit of red meat if any Russians actually bothered to watch it.
Sure. Okay. Let's move on to the McDonald's video, which was a bit strange. I won't spend much time on this one because it was kind of a lesser video. He went to a knockoff McDonald's and he made a big deal about how everything was cheaper there, and about the fact that it's probably better for you because there's no GMO in Russia. I don't know why he made such a big deal out of that, which is a bit strange. But I don't associate McDonald's with GMO. Maybe they are. I don't know. Whatever. But he really focused on the price, and this is obviously about to become a theme in his other videos. Which is kind of a bit silly because obviously everything's cheaper in a place like Russia. It reflects the relative value of currencies. You can get literally 3 times as many rubles for an American dollar now than you could 10 years ago because there's been runaway inflation for the last decade. It's just, it just seemed didn't get me angry. It just seemed weird and silly to me. Do you have any thoughts about the McDonald's video before we move on?
It just felt a bit useful idiot. The supermarket, when he's showing how much he got for $100. I think the average weekly wage in Russia is like $200.
Yes, $195. So actually, let me just play the video, and then we'll talk about it. Let's go straight to the shopping, and so I'll play the shopping one for everyone, so you can see what I'm talking about, and then Elle, you can keep on going about that.
I went from amused to legitimately angry. So we were guessing what this would cost. Everybody here's from the United States buys groceries, and we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought, corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us. And coming to a Russian grocery store, the heart of evil, and seeing what things cost and how people live, it will radicalize you against our leaders. That's how I feel anyway, radicalized.
Yeah, it just is quite bizarre when this is transparently anyone can sort of push back on it. It just did seem quite bizarre, but again, I think he's really just playing to the crowd of saying, just America's gone to the dogs. There's just general decline. Everything's worse. Sort of trying to harken back to the a time that there wasn't, but saying when everyone's shopping trolleys were full and families were families and all that kind of stuff is just very much a part of his false nostalgia. It just is weird, but that it's something that is so easily rebuttable, I suppose you'd say. But again, I think it's just surely they know that some of this is performative. It's really just sort of reaching out to a certain kind of person, I suppose, that just wants to hear what they want to hear.
I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Okay, let me firstly say why this video I just played you is actually the one that pisses me off the most. Well, tied with some of the interview bits he did later on when he came back. Firstly, as you say, very eminently rebuttable, and so I will rebut it. A real journalist would have bothered to actually compare the products he bought to what they actually cost in America rather than just making it up off the top of your head. That's the first thing. That's what a real journalist would do. The second thing is that a number of people have tried to replicate Tucker's shop in America. I can tell you online, no one got exactly the same because they're Russian products. Well, actually, they're French products. This isn't a French supermarket, by the way. His whole comparison of Russia and America is bullshit because it was a French supermarket. But anyway,
just on that point, I will say, because the Russian food is really good, except cheese is terrible. And French cheese is really sought after, but really, really expensive because it has all these tariffs, and then because of sanctions and things like that, apparently it's just gone through the roof. So I don't know. I'm calling bullshit if he's buying cheese.
Okay. Well, just so you know, the results online vary between locations and the kind of supermarket they go to. I've seen results from about $180 to $300 for this supposed $400 shop. I haven't seen anyone get the $400. That's just one little thing there. Secondly, he's wrong because even if he made a legit price comparison, which he didn't, he obviously didn't consider the different prices in Russia, and like other things are different other than supermarket prices, like wages, for instance, as you said. Now, to be fair, Russia and America have very different purchasing powers. So that messes with direct comparisons with wages. Wages buy different things in the different countries, right? Fair enough. But if Tucker actually cared about how much food cost in Russia versus America, what he would do is he would compare how much people in the two countries spend on food. That's the way you can tell how much food costs with different purchasing powers, right? The percentage of the wage which is spent on food. That's how you can tell, right? So he didn't do it, so I will. According to TASS, which is a Russian state-owned news agency, okay? I'm using Russian figures here. According to them, in a 2021 survey of 5,000 people, 60% of Russians, 60.4% of Russians spent half their salary on food. 16% spent almost all of their earnings on food, which means when you add them together, 76% of people spent over half their salary on food, half or more. 8.8% spent less than 20% of their income on food, according to that TASS survey. By contrast, the average American spends 11.3% of their disposable income on food. Even the poorest quintile spend 31% of their wage on food. Bear in mind, 76% of Russians spend half or more. Now, if you don't want to use a survey because you don't think that's precise enough, fine. We have to use American figures then, I'm afraid. But as it turns out, the American figures are more generous to Russia than the Russian figures. The USDA compares the two countries precisely. Even though it's an American source, it says that Russia, 28.9% of an average Russian consumer's total expenditures in 2022 was spent on groceries alone, according to the USDA. 28.9%, the average Russian. In America, it was 6.7%, a quarter of the Russians. And literally, by the way, the lowest share in the world. Okay, so it's absurd to compare the consumer comfort of citizens between America and Russia. Obviously, 20% of Russia still use outhouses, for Christ's sake. But of all the comparisons to make, food prices is the dumbest one for Tucker Carlson to make because the food is particularly cheap in America. In fact, one of the knocks on America is they use a third world to subsidize their prices, right? So, of course, things are cheap in America. But anyway, that's only the first two things. Then let's say he was right. Let's say Russia is damn cheap and America's really expensive and grocery prices are wonderful in Russia. Let's say he was right. His broader point that he's making with all this is somehow even worse, which is that he thinks grocery prices are more important than whether your leader is, quote, a good guy or a bad guy, as he puts it in that video we just played. More importantly, he says people should be radicalized by the prices. It's more important than ideology, he says, like talking about political freedom. Ideology. What a dick. I'm sorry, 8 Sin Sin. I can feel a swear word coming on with this guy. That was so shit. Like, it was just, but now we're going to get into discussing whether he's for real or not. But just, it made, and it also, by the way, the other thing that made me angry about this is he echoed it in his little Dubai jaunt as well. I'll play you what he said there.
What was radicalizing, very shocking and very disturbing for me was the city of Moscow, where I'd never been, the biggest city in Europe, 13 million people. And it is so much nicer than any city in my country. I had no idea. My father spent a lot of time there in the 80s when he worked for the US government and barely had electricity. And now it is so much cleaner and safer and prettier aesthetically. It's architecture, it's food, it's service, than any country, city in the United States that you have to, and this is non-ideological. How did that happen? How did that happen? And at a certain point, I don't think the average person cares as much about abstractions as about the concrete reality of his life. And if you can't use your subway, for example, as many people are afraid to in New York City because it's too dangerous, you have to sort of wonder, like, isn't that the ultimate measure of leadership?
First of all, criticisms of Putin, abstractions. And the ultimate measure of leadership is how safe the subway is. Okay, first of all, before I rant, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, look, I do think that some of this, especially the grocery stuff, this is what really makes me think it is a quid pro. That actually feels like it's more for perhaps for a Russian domestic audience. There's an election coming up and saying, yeah, look, this Americans come over and just be, wow, look at how cheap your groceries are. You know, everything is actually really great. Because, you know, people are, you know, getting a bit sick of Putin, maybe. It's probably only really, you know, it's sort of hard to measure these things. And, you know, it's obviously the country is getting much more authoritarian by the minute. But one measure of perhaps people being sick of Putin is that TV viewing has gone way down since the start of the Ukraine war. So people are just kind of tuning out. And so, yeah, this is the kind of thing that I feel like it is a bit of a, you know, what was a bit of a favor for the Russian election, just to say, yeah, look, everything is actually really great.
I find that really interesting. I'm so glad that you said that, because that does explain things. That does make, I mean, that makes me feel slightly better, because at least it means that he's not for real. Like it's because I mean, I know I'm kind of libertarian, but it just gets me so angry. just complete indifference to political freedom. You know, like it's. Oh, by the way, that answer I just played, the question was comparing Putin to Biden. That's what the question was. How do you compare Putin to Biden? He answers with that shit about don't worry about abstractions, worry about the subways, as if Biden has anything to do with the safety on the subway at New York. I mean, like, just like it's just for those who like I mean, you may have explained it quite well there, but I just for those who think there's anything to what Tucker's saying, I just want to just add the fact that since 2022, because there are a lot of pro-Russians out there online, let me tell you, I come across quite a few of them. Since 2022, over 1 million people have fled Russia. Okay, I don't think they think that a clean subway station is more important than abstractions. There are over 500 political prisoners in Russia right now. And I don't mean Marjorie Taylor Greene political prisoners, January 6 type political prisoners. I mean real political prisoners, okay? And I'm not counting the 360 odd people who were just arrested for lighting candles and singing at a plaque for Navalny, right? I'm not counting the 15 years prison that people can get for calling the war calling the special military operation a war. And I'm not sure those guys are amazed by the shopping trolleys, which we just skip past. But everyone knows the shopping trolley clip. It doesn't matter. Even as we speak right now, the Russians just took another American prisoner because she apparently donated $51.80 to Raise 'Em, which is a New York-based charity that sends assistance to Ukraine. That I didn't get that from America. I got that from Russian news. That is Russia. The Russian side of the story is that she donated $51 to a charity that helps out Ukraine. So they arrested her, potentially for God knows how long. But according to Tucker, that's all less important than clean and safe subways. And there's one more quote, by the way. One more, if you think I'd be unfair, he backed over it slightly later in this interview as well.
You didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming elections.
I didn't talk about the things that every other American media outlet talks about.
Why?
Exclusively.
Yes, this
because
is my
those
question.
are covered, and because I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following, that every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people, sorry. That's why I wouldn't want to be a leader. That press restriction is universal in the United States. I know because I've lived it. Ask my former, I've had a lot of jobs. And I've done this for 34 years and I know how it works. And there's more censorship in Russia than there is in the United States, but there's a great deal in the United States.
Leadership involves killing people. I was quite revealing. Also, by the way, the bit about censorship as well. I mean, yeah. He admitted, America has less censorship than Russia. Yeah, that's true. But still a great deal of censorship. Reporters Without Borders rate Russia as 164 out of 180 in their press freedom index. That's 12 places below Afghanistan, by the way. Although it's above Iran. Well done, Russia. Congratulations. To be fair, America's number 45. I was a bit surprised by that. And Australia's number 27. I found it interesting that UK was number 26, above both of them, even with their defamation laws. Can you guess number one? I bet you can. It's always number one.
It'd be like New Zealand or Norway.
Norway.
Yeah. It's always.
It's always Norway. You want to talk about cancel culture? A dude committed suicide last week because people were unhappy with him telling the truth about casualty numbers in one of Ukraine's battles. So he committed suicide. That's cancel culture for you. It's anyway. I've probably
it is. You can definitely see Tucker and his cohort will be, comparing, being shadow banned on Facebook, massive air quotes, with political imprisonment in Russia. Because that's the thing they always go on about, is that their nieces and nephews aren't liking their posts, and therefore it's a conspiracy from Zuckerberg all the way down to make sure that they're silenced.
To be fair, I'll tell you the thing they love to do. Once again, I know plenty of these people. They love to go about Julian Assange. They go, what about Julian Assange? And what I say there is, I agree with you. The Julian Assange thing is awful. I'm not a big, people know I'm not a fan of what's going on with Julian Assange, but Julian Assange is one person. Russia is every person. Russia is hundreds of millions of people being censored and oppressed. It's not just one person. Okay, America is not perfect. It's pretty far from perfect. But you know what? It's a lot better than Russia. It's a lot better. Anyway. And I feel like that talking point there of trying to compare the two, just going, some leaders kill more than others. Putin kills people, Biden kills people. Yeah, Biden kills people with drones. He doesn't kill his opposition. He doesn't kill journalists. He doesn't kill. Anyway, I'm going to get myself upset. Okay, so what do you think was going on? Tell me, what do you reckon? What do you reckon is going on with Tucker Carlson? Do you think he actually believes this? Do you think it's possible he believes this, or do you think it's all bad faith?
Like I said, I think it's just throwing all sorts of stuff out and just seeing what sticks. There's obviously some simpatico there with, and you're seeing it with a lot of people on the right that Russia's this bastion of traditional values and families and
culture war,
Christianity. And it's kind of just buying into all that stuff, seeing what sticks. It's a bit of muckraking, it's a bit of throwing stuff around, but I really think that I'm just so convinced now that this whole election is going to be a referendum on San Francisco. It's all you see in the right-wing media is constantly everything about San Francisco. The gift of, Kamala Harris being a black woman from San Francisco is just going to be, just an endless fodder. And so I think when you see things like, just going on about the subway, because the public transport in San Francisco is quite terrifying. I have been on it and I wouldn't recommend it. So I think it really is just it's really just going to be a stand-in for this general sense of American decline. I mean, MAGA was obviously the original of that, and they're just bringing out the playbook again to say, just tap into a general sense of American decline, which I think is out there and fairly legitimate. It's not the 1960s anymore, and false nostalgia seems to be a pretty wealthy economy to buy into. So, I think it's just a bit of a preview of some talking points and just, once again, just throwing stuff out there and seeing what sticks.
Certainly John Stewart, that's his theory, the culture war theory, that this is part of the culture war. And so they're so obsessed with anti-wokeness that Putin's become a figure of virtue, and they don't like his oppression, but they really like his cultural conservatism, so they try to ignore the negatives. I don't know. I'm kind of torn because I also think he might be trying to suck up to his audience because he's starting this website where she needs subscriptions for. And so he wants to culture a small, ravenous following who are willing to pay for your content, and that's the way you become rich on the internet. But he's already
very
rich.
much so.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but he's so rich already, so maybe he doesn't need the money. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's it's the attention economy. And yeah, like I said, I think that there was just there was just a quid pro quo between him and Putin. It did them both a favor. He gave Putin some nice election material, and Putin gave him, made him relevant again, because I think there is he definitely probably has some relevance deprivation syndrome. He's the Twitter thing just isn't taking off without the Fox News audience. He just still isn't the same kind of guy anymore, and he needs like you said, he needs to build a following.
Thing is though, that with I agree with you about that. I can't help noticing he's dropped the price stuff. As soon as he got back to America, he dropped the price stuff completely, which is why what you're saying rings true to me, that might have been part of the deal for Russia, because that would be valuable to Russia. To Americans, it seems ridiculous. But to Russia, that might be valuable, as you say, part of the election. But he's still going on about the crime and all that kind of stuff. I wonder whether it might be, and this is kind of what you're hinting at as well, a bit of audience capture. Like he's captured by his own audience. It's like Elon Musk, where they fall in love with the love they get from their audience, and they kind of drive each other along. And you kind of like in their audience. I think his audience is a particularly nihilistic audience, and I think they kind of egg each other with cynicism and everyone does it and everything's shit, and I think that that might be part of it. Maybe, I don't know. It just seems, because he's going on with it. He's going on with it now. He's back, but only the crime stuff, not the society's gone crazy stuff, not the price stuff. So that's why I think maybe that might be part of it there. But,
and I think you've just got to remember as well. I mean, there is a fairly I don't know if substantial is the right word, but there is certainly a portion of the MAGA movement that thinks that you should lock up your political enemies or take them out. How many speeches did Trump give at rallies when people were cheering lock her up? At Clinton, where Trump said, what if I shot someone in Fifth Avenue, I'd get away with it or something like that. So there this sort of anti-liberalism that's become quite pronounced on the right certainly has it's perhaps not as fringe as we might like it to be.
Yeah. Or alternatively, maybe his brain has just turned to mush. It happens to a lot of people. It's happened to a lot of my family. But,
being online is kind of NFL level CTE sometimes. And if you do just spend all your days on Twitter and those kind of closed-in forums, I don't think it's good for the brain.
Okay, Stats Nugget. Woo! All right, I want to show you a graph. Here we go. This graph is showing you the number of comparative House districts in each election as time goes on. These are midterms and presidential terms every 2 years. And you can see the comparative House districts are disappearing. The latest one says 23. It's actually 22. It's actually just dropped down by one. So we are at an all-time low for comparative House districts. And they're defining comparative House districts as within 5 points, either R+5 or D+5. So, with 22 comparative House districts, let me tell you what the corollary of that is. What that means is, this year, there are more districts up for grabs in court being decided what's going to be gerrymandered, what's not going to be gerrymandered, than there will be up for election in November. Like there are a good 5-6 states in court, and each of those states have a number of seats up for grabs as a result of court cases. So we are now getting to the point where literally the courts are more important than the votes. And
well, so that's the logical conclusion of America, isn't it?
It's it's quite sobering, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just to go on about those competitive districts, because obviously I've got a real interest in the Pentecostal movement and evangelicals in America, and just some of the swings that have been happening. So in Hispanic majority places, I know Dave's talked a lot about that the Hispanic vote returning to historical levels with the GOP, but along the Texas-Mexico border, some of the swings. There was a 55 percentage point swing in one of the counties between the Hillary Clinton election and Joe Biden to the Republicans. So we're just seeing, and a few of the neighboring ones, there were, trying to find it now, but just insane, like 55 points is just in 4 years is a remarkable swing. And so I think, you're not seeing those competitive things. There just seems to be some complete landslide changes, and I know Miami-Dade County had a big one as well, and basically so I think 5 counties along the Mexico border have just massively swung to the Republicans, probably for religious reasons, and also because ICE is the big employer in town, and people just and there kind of is a historical thing that sometimes migrants get across the border and like to pull up the drawbridge, and these are towns where people speak.
As well.
These are towns where people still speak Spanish at home and things like that. So I just think it's really interesting to see that, that some of the massive swings that are occurring between elections and just how sort of rusted on districts are becoming now.
Yeah. By the way, I did terrible craft before. For those who actually listening to the podcast, I didn't see it. I didn't actually even describe what the graph said. Like I said, 22 competitive districts in this election. 2022 was about 45. It was in the low 40s. 2020 was about 75. 2018 was about 75. And then you go back to 998 as 164. So it is racing down, like just in the space of 26 years, like 13 elections. It's gone from 164 competitive seats to 22. So like it is, and it's going down a lot just in the last one. So it's still going. So there'll be less next time. Yeah.
Maybe that dream, I've seen both sides of politics do it, but how they've often, I remember after Trump got elected that there was, sort of a liberal movement saying, oh, what, if we just move like 5,000 people to Wyoming or whatever, we can get their Senate votes. And people in the sort of Republican have mooted that as well, just move into a certain district. So, maybe the dream actually might come true.
Maybe. I can only hope. Tell me about Navalny, because I just don't. I mean, obviously I know he died, but just tell me about the actual person, because he's been sainted by a whole bunch of people, and he's been vilified by a whole bunch of other people. Like I said, I only know what I've read in the last week or two. So what's your take on him? Like what's your vibe on Navalny generally?
Sure. So he's a very interesting and remarkable figure, and I think he speaks to a lot of the contradictions and the culture of modern Russia. So just a basic précis on him. He's grew up just outside of Moscow. His family started a small business that I think was fairly successful after the fall of the wall. He went to law school, was obviously quite bright. And his original sort of foray into politics was shareholder activism in the late 90s, I think. So obviously all of those big Russian or Soviet companies were privatized in the 90s, and that's where you get the oligarch class from, because they were sort of the biggest thugs basically who were able to grab hold of some of these companies. And he got involved in, sort of a small movement to try and, get shares in some companies and hold them accountable. Because, they were effectively stolen, a lot of these, massive gas companies and things like that, stolen from the Russian people for the enrichment of a small few. So he got involved in that, and then got involved in a liberal political movement called Yabloko in the early 2000s. Yabloko means apple. I'm still not sure the actual etymology of how that became the political party name, but he was involved with the apples. And that was, they were a very liberal party, and liberalism was not, a lot of Russians aren't so keen on it. They sort of wanted liberalization after the collapse of the Soviet Union, But, liberalization in the 90s also looked like, again, enrichment of these oligarchs, massive corruption, grandma's pension becoming worthless and her having to sell trinkets on the side of the road. And it, at the same time, and sort of there was constant, just daylight murders, mafia, shootouts in the streets in St. Petersburg in particular. So it was a pretty grim time. And I mean, part of Putin's popularity was that when he came to power, he did sort of offer those more material things for people. It was, sort of a bit of a, I think just a change in direction and the economy getting itself going. But for example, in Soviet times, a lot of, you'd have a 3-bedroom apartment that would house 3 families and everyone all slept in the same room. Putin sort of, under sort of his stewardship and just the general economic tide, people started getting their own houses for their own families for the first time. People started getting televisions and things like that. So he always, he was always very popular. So general liberalism was often associated with the chaos of the 90s. So Navalny being a very liberal figure was an outlier. I mean, he also speaks, I understand he spoke pretty perfect English, which again is a bit unusual for a Russian. And I think why he's always been viewed with some skepticism inside Russia, that he is a bit of a Western plant. But I mean, what he did really well was that he focused, when he got involved in politics, he really turned his focus to corruption of the elite. And corruption is something that is always, anti-corruption is something that's always very popular because it's something that people see and feel every day. And, you might be out in the provinces and you get pulled over and you have to pay a bribe for a speeding ticket. That's affecting your life. That's affecting, how much you can put in your Tucker Carlson shopping trolley at the end of the day. And it, it is the one thing that sort of really unites people, in Russia and in all sorts of authoritarian countries, is that hatred of corruption. So Navalny really doubled down and got involved in that. And he was just really good at social media. He was really good at catchphrases. So he coined a phrase of Putin's United Russia Party as the party of crooks and thieves. And that just became a really popular epithet that people would start to use. And it just sort of really symbolized just a general dislike of the people in charge. At the same time, while Navalny was really building himself up as an anti-corruption advocate, he was also quite involved in some pretty nasty nationalist stuff. So he was actually expelled from the Yabloko Party in 2007 for attending a nationalist march, which looked fairly, certainly had notes of neo-Nazism about it. And he did say some pretty horrible things about migrants, generally Central Asian migrants. You can't walk around Moscow without seeing construction underway, and nearly everyone on the construction site is a Central Asian migrant. And a lot of them, sort of a bit like Hispanic labor is used in the United States. A lot of people just come in kind of illegally, but everyone knows that they're there and they are the labor for some pretty nasty work. And they, obviously get paid much less than you would pay a native Russian. So there's always been a bit of tension about them in the country. And Navalny really grabbed onto some of that. And he said some pretty awful things saying, deport them. He compared militants from the Caucasus to cockroaches, general trope of, vermins. What do you do to vermin? And he also weirdly got involved in gun rights, which has made some people, particularly I think on the left, a bit skeptical. Was he getting US funding or did he have US people in his ear about getting into gun rights? But then quite interestingly, he sort of really moderated a lot of his views in recent years. And again, I do wonder how much of that is just sort of knowing where his bread is buttered. He was doing a lot of stuff in Germany and places like that. And, I think and look, it's probably fair enough. He's wanting to get funding for his movement. He had a team of people constantly researching this stuff. It's really hard to, find missing billions in Swiss bank accounts and things like that. So he did things like he came out in favor of gay marriage, which I would guess is a very minority view in Russia. He spoke at a Black Lives Matter rally in Moscow in like 2020. So yeah, he very much moderated his views in his later years, and I suspect that's savviness, political savvy, as much as anything, but it's hard to say. So where am I? So he ran for in 2013. I think what really sort of got him on Putin's radar was that he ran for Moscow mayor, and he got 27% of the vote. And I think that really spooked the people in power, that was very clearly an anyone but these guys vote. And to be able to, with not a lot of effort, pick up 27% of the vote, I mean, it means that people know your name, are watching your videos, that sort of thing. And that's when the authoritarian state really started cracking down on him. So he was banned. He tried to run again in 2018 and was banned. And then he started getting all of these sort of bogus, trumped up charges against him. So he got done for corruption and embezzlement. And he got done, for a few protests and things like that early on, might have, but not listening to public officials or something, was jailed for 15 days. But yeah, the corruption charges sort of started rolling in, and they kept getting more and more trumped up, you might say. So eventually he got extremism charges a couple of years ago, which I think gave him 19 years in prison. And why Navalny is such a remarkable figure, notwithstanding some of his history, is that he realized that he's most effective as a political prisoner in Russia. If he wanted to be like Khodorkovsky, the oligarch who was jailed by Putin for a while and I think now lives in London or something like that, these figures, they don't go back to Russia. They're just, poking from the sidelines, and they're sort of, I think, often seen as not being as authentic and not as relevant because they're just disconnected from Russia. He very bravely received this sentence in absentia and went back to Russia to serve it, knowing that it was going to be extremely hard. Russia's got quite a history of having very rough prisons. Being sent to the Arctic Circle is pretty horrendous. So he was poisoned with Novichok in August 2020, which is a nerve agent that they poisoned the Scruples with in London, and is just horrendous on the body. He was in a coma and was flown to Germany and received some treatment and was able to get back to normal. I mean, there's always been, rumors that it probably had affected his health in the long term. No one knows exactly what, but I imagine, if you're having poison that's messing with your nervous system that's killed other people, you're probably going to have some pretty awful long-term consequences of that. And then obviously being sent to a penal colony that's minus 30 degrees Celsius. Apparently he was, solitary confinement, which is obviously a form of torture. And there was some rumors that they were doing a lot of sleep deprivation and stuff like that. So you can imagine he probably wasn't in the best of health. Obviously his recent, whatever happened that he died last week is really hard to say. There's been some rumors that he was poisoned again because they haven't been releasing the body, and it takes apparently traces of it can leave the body in a certain amount of time, even a dead body. But look, it is hard to say. I mean, Putin has obviously indirectly killed him. Whether this actually came from the big boss is hard to say. I mean, he could have been beaten by an overzealous prison guard.
Yeah.
The elections coming up, my first thought was that, perhaps a local governor or something like that was trying to get Putin's favor. You often see this sort of thing. So when Boris Nemtsov, the other opposition leader, was killed in, I can't remember when it was, maybe 2015, he was murdered. And it seems that that was from the Chechen leader, or the leader of the Chechen state or province, Kadyrov. And it seems that he did it as a birthday present for Putin. And you always get these sort of regional governors just trying to, do favors for the big boss. So it could have just been, some local official who just wanted to get the big guy's attention and do him a favor before the election.
So that's what you get, the guy who has everything.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's I mean, some of Navalny's work, was showing that Putin is probably one of the richest people in the world. You hear about these oligarchs and stuff, but Putin's obviously squirreled a fair bit for himself away. So yeah, I mean, whether it actually came from Putin, I don't know. And I mean, we might never know. There do seem to be a couple of interesting things happening, though. I mean, the fact that there hasn't been any real public rallies or anything in his favor, I think shows that, there is obviously much more of a climate of fear that has come since the start of the Ukraine war. Apparently his wife is much more popular inside of Russia than he is, and she's obviously going to stay outside of the country and continue his quest.
Why would that be?
He's not universally loved.
I know, but he came back. She didn't.
Yeah, I think she's just more likable. I'm not sure exactly, but he still had quite a high. Someone released some things. He had a much higher disapproval rating than approval rating. He had a 27% approval rating.
I was going to say, I was going to ask you about that. I've got a few questions coming up, and that's one of them. In fact, I'll ask it right now. Like, might as well just ask that question right now, which is, was he actually popular? Given that the Levada Center found in October 2020, his approval was 20%, 50% disapproval. In February 2021, 19% approval, 56% disapproval. I can't find him ever having a higher approval than in the low 20s. So is he I can also understand that it'd be hard to become popular in Russia when you're not allowed on TV and the media aren't allowed to cover you. But what was he? Is he just more popular in the West than he is in Russia?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so at a guess. And I think, again, that probably feeds into some of it is the suspicion, of people going outside and getting money. And, if you start to sort of tar everyone with the same brush and sort of say that, they're all the same. Anyone who does well in Russia, just goes west and has a good life while the rest of us are, struggling to fill up our Tucker Carlson trolleys. I suspect that I think his work was very popular. And there was, a lot of videos and stuff that would circulate that people mightn't necessarily associate with him. It's just, good anti-corruption kind of stuff that he was doing. But, I think it's really interesting as well. So as I was saying before, his wife is apparently quite popular, and how she's able to keep the movement going will be quite interesting. But also the fact that they wouldn't give the body to his mother. Which I think is, historically, it is not great to piss off Russian mothers. People have a lot of sympathy. You can relate to that being your mum or someone that you care about. And I mean, if you look at, we were speaking about the Afghanistan war earlier. What really started to cause ructions in the failing Soviet Union was all of these mothers who were being told that there wasn't really a war going on and getting their sons home in caskets. And so, there's sort of a history of, don't piss off grieving mothers in Russia. And his family has, I believe, so far refused, because they said they can only have the body back if they don't have a public funeral. And the family has so far refused that. His poor brother has received some more, received a new sentence as well, I believe. And his family has stayed in the country, which again is quite a remarkable thing, because they are so much more effective, I think, being in the country and being brave enough and saying that, we are Russian, we're not just another group of people that's, getting rich and moving to the French Riviera or to London. So there has been really a lot of bravery on the part of the family. But yeah, I mean, what it means going forward, Mark Galeotti, who I've recommended before, who's a really great expert on Russia, he's made the argument that this murder speaks to Putin's weakness rather than his strength. He believes that if Putin's having it, or Putin's having it done, or someone's having it done on his behalf, is a symbol that he's weak and he is scared of opposition, and that he's at his strongest when he can just ignore these guys, which is also, by the by, what Putin always did. He would never mention Navalny's name. He would make allusions to him, about the guy in prison on corruption charges and things like that. But he quite deliberately would never say his name. He would never dignify that, he had any sort of standing that Putin would care personally about him. But he's been murdered now, and very clearly he did.
Yeah. For those who are watching who can see my eyes darting around, it's not because I'm not paying attention. I am. But the reason why is because there's something you said which has just tripped me off, Elle, which is two things actually. Number one, saying that Navalny is more popular in Russia than Navalny was. And secondly, don't mess around with people's mums. Those two things combined have combined in my head because I'm very sure I saw somewhere a quote from Navalny's mother, which I can't find at the moment, annoyingly, going Navalny hard, saying you haven't even seen him since 2022. The only reason he came back is because you forced him to come back. He's dead because of you. You couldn't wait. You couldn't wait a day before you started to exploit his death and to try to it was really hardcore. And I thought to myself, and at the time I didn't quite understand what was going on there, but now I'm starting to understand what's going on.
I actually didn't see that, but it has been rumored for a while that she has a boyfriend or something like that, and is sort of, made a bit of a new life in the West and is quite happy. So I think that there may be some resentment. I'm not sure if there's actual polling on Navalny being more popular, but my friend Ollie Carroll, who was the Moscow correspondent for The Economist and is now the Kiev correspondent for obvious reasons, he said that she is much more popular in Russia.
Yeah, sure. I'm suggesting that maybe someone might have had a word to Navalny's mum saying you might want to say something like this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they seem to have refusing to accept the deal for getting his body back.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it is just very, very brave of the family to stay there. I think, they would rightfully be given refugee visas in a lot of Western countries. So yeah, just hope that they're okay.
Okay. I've got a few questions for you. When I think of Navalny, one of the things that stands out for me is the humor. Like, no matter what the situation, he was always cracking a joke. Like, there's so much footage of him in jail cracking jokes, and coming out of solitary confinement cracking a joke. I kind of feel like that's almost his secret weapon in a way. Even the day before he died, he was joking with his judge. Is that something that's generally thought about him, or is that just something that's just like is that kind of his reputation? Or is that just something that I just observed that really isn't?
No, I think you definitely picked up on something, and I think he's generally something of a charismatic figure, which might explain why he's polarizing. Often charismatic figures they appeal to some and not others, but he did do that very well and really better than anyone. Was that his videos were humorous, that he came up with lines like the party of crooks and thieves. He just had a way that tallied very well with the social media age. I think that he was just able to get a quip in. But probably his most famous joke. Do you know about about the prank phone call?
No.
Oh, okay. He published a telephone call. Where am I? Just checking here. He got the FSB, so the successor to the KGB. He prank called the guy from the FSB who was responsible for his poisoning and got him to admit to it, and was sort of saying that he was the big boss, and was asking him things like, do you remember what color his underwear was, and and stuff like that. Was just getting him to say some pretty stupid stuff, and that there is a real culture in Russia of prank calling famous people. And getting them to, say very stupid things. So yeah, this is, he, like you said, he obviously had a pretty good sense of humor. And I don't know, if someone tried to kill me, I might be a bit less jovial about it. But once again, I think that kind of humiliation is quite a powerful tool, and Russians do famously have a wonderful sense of humor. All of the jokes that used to come out of the communist times, sort of about hardships and stuff. So I think it's certainly added to his aura.
Did you get a sense with him that he was, if he'd ever gotten into power, that he was actually a legitimate chance of liberalizing Russia? Because the reason I say that is because he wouldn't be the first future dictator to ride to power through opposing corruption. That's a way that a lot of people do it. And as you said, at times he appeared to have different views. Like did you have a sense of how legit his conversion was?
Like I said, I do have some question marks around it because it's sort of his renouncement of, of his past nationalist and racist comments and his embrace of some, just issues that aren't really a game in town, like gay marriage in Russia, does make me think that he was, sort of clever enough to know that what people would like in the West, and, people that run think tanks and give money and look after you and your family, so that, when you're staying in Germany or whatever. So I think he was, just canny enough to sort of realize, perhaps maybe what people wanted to hear. Look, he might have had a Damascene conversion. But I think that, I think there's a real misconception in the West that's always, after Putin, or if Putin gets rolled, that it's going to be, some sort of great liberal government and democracy and everything's going to be fine. I mean, you'd have to say that if he got rolled, or that if he dies tomorrow, that there's a good chance that the person who succeeds him will be further to the right. And nationalism, and pretty rabid stuff and hawkishness. There is a big place for it, a big reservoir of it in Russia, and on television. There's quite frequently guys who are very hawkish, far more hawkish than Putin, who are saying we should be nuking Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. And that there is that ecosystem swirling around out there. So, I mean. And again, his popularity for the work that he was doing, for the one issue that I think you could really unite Russians on, which is anti-corruption, he still wasn't a terribly popular figure in the country. So I just think that a general liberalism and looking toward the West just is as popular as people might want to think.
Another question for you is, like, as you mentioned his prison history, and like how he had when he got poisoned. I don't think you mentioned this part, but I always love it that when he got poisoned and he came back, he was jailed for breaching his bail.
Yes, because he was in a coma.
He was in a coma. He was taken out of the country. He skipped bail in a coma. Anyway, and then when he was in jail, he got 2.5 years for parole violations, and he got 9 years for embezzlement, and then 19 years for extremism. Okay, and then you mentioned the solitary confinement. I think the numbers I've got here is there were 27 times as in solitary confinement, over 300 days in penalty cells. This is in the Arctic as well, so they've been cold and moldy and horrible. He's already poisoned. He had to learn to walk again and talk again, all this kind of stuff. Why couldn't he have just died because of the effects of Novichok? Like people just assuming he was murdered, and I'm not running a conspiracy theory here, but I just like to see some evidence. That's all. It's
yeah. I mean, certainly it is possible, and he was looking a bit gaunt, and like I said, yeah, that prison would not be a nice place. But I mean, if he still did die of the effects of Novichok, it's still murder, even if the job isn't done for a couple of years.
Totally.
And I mean, once again, I mean, the original poisoning, look, no one ever knows exactly, but it's thought that was some FSB agents giving Putin a gift again, that it didn't necessarily come from him. So again, you could have had any number of people freelancing on this on this assassination. So
okay, and let's say he was killed then by whoever. The timing of it, because he's in Siberia. He's not going anywhere for quite a few years. It seems the timing of it just before an election is too coincidental to ignore. But I don't understand why it's a good thing for Putin to kill him before an election. Are they he's doing nothing in prison? Why make him an issue before an election? I mean, try and think about this, and I suppose, I remember reading, one of the things I read about Navalny was that one of his theories was he tried to become as famous as possible, because he thought that the more famous you are, the harder he is to kill. And I can't help thinking that also works for Putin as well, saying, look, I can kill anyone. All you people out there who are screwing around with me, look, I can kill him. I can kill anyone. So I could see the logic there. And even especially before an election, I could see him maybe wanting to Like I know they had another opposition leader spring up who was surprisingly effective for a while there until Putin disqualified him. Like I could see maybe when Putin wanting to remove hope from the people trying to resist him before an election. Maybe I don't actually. I'm trying to come up with a reason. Do you have any thoughts about the logic for why he would want to have him killed before an election?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, my first thought when I was reading about this was that it was probably more likely to have been either an overzealous prison guard or a local governor who, or mayor or some sort of mafia figure who wanted to give Putin a bit of a gift, because it seems more like something like that. Maybe this, I don't know, a local governor is in a bit of trouble or, facing some domestic opposition. The thing with Russia, it is a lot like the United States in a lot of ways, and that it is quite an unruly federation of states, and local governors do have a lot of power. I mean, when you're in Siberia, it's longer. It's I think, what is it, further from like Siberia to Moscow than Moscow to London or something like that. So it just is such a far way away. They're often very ethnically formed states, so they have there's just culturally there's a lot of sort of things going on. So I do wonder if it was someone just trying to give the boss a gift, because it does seem a little curious just before an election. And again, maybe it just is Mark Galeotti's theory that this shows that Putin is not as strong as he used to be. The fact that he felt that he had to do it, that he's having to eliminate the opposition, whereas his thing with dealing with Navalny from, at least 2013 onwards was just to never say his name and to never dignify him and to never put him up on the same level as an opposition leader. So yeah, time will tell. But I mean, this stuff does seem to get out of Russia, even though it's a pretty repressive environment at the moment. It seems to Nemtsov's, probable assassination by Kadyrov got out. The fact that it was one particular FSB agent who poisoned Navalny got out. So I think that we will know in time, and I think it will be quite telling about the state of Putin's Russia and exactly what perhaps where the country is going now.
Yeah, one of the point about the timing actually was made by Tucker Carlson of all people in that interview which I saw with Glenn Beck, and I thought, actually, not a bad point.
I know this. Him dying during the Munich Security Conference in the middle of the debate on Ukraine funding, both of which they're highly aware of, doesn't help Russia.
Yeah.
So the people saying, oh, Putin just had him murdered last week, because they're idiots. They don't actually know anything. They don't know anything.
Okay, so leaving aside his random drive-by abuse, the point about the Munich conference, I thought that's a fair point. Like I know that Michael Moynihan I saw a podcast with him where he said he went through all the major Russian newspapers in the 2 days after Navalny died, and he wasn't mentioned once in any of the newspapers. And he cited that as an example of the kind of censorship and oppression in Russia. But I tell you who for a fact would have known about Navalny's death, and that is the Munich conference, where they're talking about Ukraine funding. And by the way, we probably won't talk about this today. I'll probably say it to Dave or some other time, but I've got a little bee in my bonnet about the way that people are co-opting his death to advocate for funding of the Ukraine war, in that I am pro-funding of the Ukraine war. But if you're against it for whatever reason, if you think, Ukraine can never win, or people just dying for no reason or whatever, the death of Navalny has nothing to do with it. Like, and trying to exploit essentially his death to push your own barrow is a little bit of that evidence maximalism, which I described before, which is that does annoy me. But the fact is, people are doing it, and that is an eminently predictable result. So I think Tucker Carlson is right that at the very least, if Putin cares about the funding of Ukraine war, they're much more likely to get funding as a result of Navalny dying than not. Like, they're going to trot out his widow in Congress for sure. And this happened, and this happened right when the meeting was happening. So I think that's a legit point for Tucker Carlson to raise. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, totally, and especially I think perhaps Germany and some of the European states who are wavering on this question as well, and obviously in the United States. I mean, like Navalny is just going to become quite an important figure in all of this, and it does seem a bit odd that the two sort of things are happening at once. But again, like I said, I would just until we found out that Putin specifically wanted this to happen, I would tend to err on the side of thinking that it might not have come directly from him. One of the things that Putin's power has done really well is kind of set out the rules and set out the ecosystem that everyone operates in. He's not, just pulling all the strings all the time. So people, so governors and oligarchs and mafia figures and things like that understand the rules and work within them. And if it comes for a time when, the Godfather asks you to for a favor, you do it. But also you are trying to, win his favor and look as though you're a team player and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just too early to say that it was definitely planned. And like you mentioned, it could just be that he just succumbed to his original poisoning through the brutal conditions. So it's hard to know, but I think it's certainly something that'll rumble on for a long time.
Sure will. One other thing which I saw on the internet, which I'm just so people know about it, was that it was in Bild magazine from Germany. They suggested that Putin was trying to make a prisoner swap for Navalny at the time he died. They said, this is the quote, according to Bild information, such negotiations actually took place. Moscow, Washington, and Berlin took part in them. Vladimir Putin wanted to get the Russian agent Vadim Krasikov, who was in prison in Germany. It was discussed that in exchange, Putin would release Navalny. Alex Navalny was about to be released. Now, I've got my doubts about that for a few reasons. The first of which is that the journalist was overhyping his own findings there. He went straight from discussions happening to about to be released. And that's always a red flag to me when people start hyping their own stuff. Secondly, that broke the day after he died. And I go, how are you hearing about that the day after he died? You're not hearing that from Germany. Like, who's telling you this? And I'm just a bit suspicious. And the other thing was, that guy he described is the same guy that Vladimir Putin a week earlier had brought up in the Tucker Carlson interview with Gershkovich. So if Putin's trying to get Gershkovich traded for him, then why would he try and trade the same guy for Navalny, who's a much more valuable figure? And also, why is he trying to trade Navalny to Germany? Like, what's Germany want with Navalny? Like, there's a few things that don't make sense to me about that. But I just want to read it out because it's out there. So just people can make up their own mind on that. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
No, very, very much agree with you there. The other thing I did forget to mention, which sort of potentially runs counter to some of my points earlier, I don't know if you saw that Russian military defector that got murdered in Spain last week.
This is the helicopter guy, yeah?
Yeah. So he was found just riddled with bullet holes, and apparently he'd contacted an ex-girlfriend. And they were obviously, tracing him, and then, found him and shot him. So again, it might, there is a chance that it really just is showing just how I guess moving from authoritarian to totalitarian the Russian state is, that, just all defectors could be killed. But yeah, there's a pretty long history of Russia going after people, Russians who leave and go to other countries. So it's hard to say, but not a good time to be a Russian dissident.
No, it's definitely not. There's a few more of them in jail where Navalny came from. I don't want to talk about Trump comparing himself to Navalny. Who, like, honestly, it's just, if you want to say anything about Trump and Navalny, you're welcome to. But I just prefer to move on because we're running out of time. So I prefer to.
I don't have the strength.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I want to just take care. Like, just don't worry about. I've got all these things which I can talk about with Dave. I know you were going to talk about the Democrat freakout. So why don't you talk about that?
Just briefly, I thought it was interesting that it was Ezra Klein and Nate Silver have both come out quite robustly saying that Biden shouldn't be running again. I mean, I think Nate Silver's been beating the drum for a while. I saw, I think it was since late last year, and and I mean, his points are looking pretty good in hindsight. That Democrats would have had a robust primary, but that is probably better than potentially going into the election with someone who everyone sort of universally seems to think is a bit old and past it, and is not looking like he's holding up well to the rigors of office. Naturally, this has kind of freaked out a lot of people. I sort of feel like it's going to be a bit of a Bernie bro Mark II thing. A lot of the people who were, really tainting Bernie Sanders supporters as misogynists and things like that. It sort of seems Joan Walsh and all that crowd sort of seem to be the same people saying, how dare you say that he's too old, you're ageist, that kind of thing. So it seems like there's kind of a bit of a civil war brewing in it. It's one of those things that is a bit online and in the media class, but again, this just seems to be something that is cutting through. And I think like Dave made the point the other week that this is a relatable thing. Like a lot of people have had to, say, grandpa, you can't drive anymore or something like that. And so it is something that people are noticing. And it's, he might deliver a flawless hour-long speech, but if he glitches once, that's going to be all over the news. And it's not just Fox News picking up this stuff anymore. It's all of the mainstream press as well. It's very you're seeing it in online memes all the time. This is really out there. And, I think it's quite interesting because I think that there will probably, between that and Palestine, I think there's going to be a lot of infighting within Democratic types for most of this year. I think it might be even more vicious than between the Republicans and the Democrats.
I think the way Ezra Klein put it, he actually gave in his piece, he gave a great summary of why Biden had been so good. Like he really advocated for Biden's case really, really well. In that, essentially, he said, here's a guy who when he beat Bernie Sanders, he could have just declared victory, but he actually reached out across the aisle and actually embraced the left to bring them on board, co-opt them, and then he had a Senate with 50 votes, like which ranged from Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders. And he carried them all along the whole way and didn't lose any important votes by bringing everyone along, which is a hard thing to do. It's easy to say. It's a hard thing to do. And then he did what Democrats have been saying forever, which is to go hard on the spending and to try and then inflation came around, which is what people say is going to happen when you spend a lot. And he didn't withdraw. He kept on going. And he managed to land a soft landing with and unemployment. There hasn't been a recession like people predicted. Like he's actually pulled off a lot of impossible things. This is what Ezra Klein's saying. But then he said, but the question isn't whether he can be president. The question is whether he can win another term. That's the question. And Ezra Klein said, I don't think he can. And so then he starts talking about brokered conventions, all this kind of stuff. Now, do you think that there is any realistic chance of a brokered convention, or like what these guys are saying? Is there anything to this whatsoever, or is this just entertainment essentially, and then we move on?
Yeah, look, I think that for probably the reasons that you outlined, that there's never going to be a brokered convention because Biden's an old school senator. He knows how to get them. He knows how to count the numbers. He knows how to, put people up against the wall, sort of thing. He knows how to extract favors, how to keep people inside. He's probably maybe that art of master of the Senate is kind of a bit of a lost thing now. But he grew up, Strom Thurmond and guys like that who absolutely knew how to get the place working. And I think for that reason, there's absolutely no chance that we'll see a brokered convention, just because he's got too many people enthralled to him, or who personally like him, or who don't want to rock the boat for various reasons. So yeah, again, look, this is kind of a media conversation, and it just a lot of. I mean, the left loves a good internecine war.
They do.
But I mean, like the the thing is, it's a real issue. It's showing up in polling. It's showing up in, just people who aren't terribly engaged in politics talking about it. It's a meme. It's in the mainstream media, and it's very clearly going to, to be saddled on the Democrats for the entire election, fairly or unfairly.
Yeah, and for that reason, actually, I just want to just very briefly just explain to people, because you're right, it's going to keep on coming up every time there's a gaffe. People are going to go, oh well, it's not too late, the convention's in August, it's not too late. We're going to be hearing this over and over and over again. So can I just put down it's not black and white, and put down in decibels just why this obviously just can't happen, and if it did, it would be insane. I mean, look, I'm of the view, as I've said many times, that Biden should have resigned a long time ago. But now it is too late. You got to dance with the one who brung you. You just got to. It is too late. And this is why. Number one, leaving aside the polling, I mentioned on Play America the fact that if you look at the polls at the moment, in Emerson polls, Donald Trump's up by 1 point over Joe Biden. He's up by 3 points over Harris. He's up by 10 points over Newsom and 12 points over Whitmer. Okay, so, and by the way, Trump is the same for all of them. It's just Newsom and Whitmer aren't polling as well. All right, so they are. But anyway, they've got
I think that was, just quickly. I think that was a point that Silver was making last year, was that you've got to sort of roll Gretchen Whitmer out and see how she's doing, and sort of get her polling and get her more of, turn her into a national figure. But then it was obviously, it's her versus Kamala Harris. It was, probably going to get nasty, and I just think the Democrats just don't have the appetite for that.
I'm going to get to that. Okay, so let's say, so how's a brokered convention work? No one's alive who was at the 968 brokered convention, and even then, with the experts at that point in time, do you know what happened then? They had a crack up and Nixon won the election. And then the Democrats didn't win another election, except for Watergate, until 1992. They suffered for 24 years. And then Watergate, they only won, I think it was 50-48, like in 1976. So they got destroyed for 30 years as a result of that broker convention. Okay, what happens before the convention? Don't worry about in the convention. What happens before it? Because we're going to have, X months, 2 months, 3 months of jockeying for positions amongst these people with no primaries. So the only way you can do it is through the media. Oh, that's a great idea. That's going to go down real well. They all going to know that this is going to be their only chance until 2032 potentially. So they're all going to go hard, and then they'll fight on air in the convention. That's where it'll peak. And then the losing supporters, yeah, sure, they might have some hard feelings. They're going to have 11 weeks to get over it before the election. 11 weeks, which is not very long before the election. And so there's be guaranteed that the supporters of who loses are going to stay home for the election. At least some of them will. Guaranteed. Then there's the money. Harris is, if it's not Harris, they're pissing away $130 million as of February. How much money will Joe Biden have raised by July or August? Like $300 million, $400 million, $600 million? They can't access that if it's Whitmer or Newsom. Okay, maybe Harris can. Maybe Harris can give it to the RNC and the RNC can help them out a bit, but it's not the same as your own money. So that's many hundreds of millions of dollars you're giving up if it's someone who isn't Biden or Harris. Then there's time. Whoever the candidate is, there's not going to be a candidate until 11 weeks before the election. That's 11 weeks to introduce yourself, to make people comfortable with you, to overcome any issues. Who is good at running for president in 11 weeks? Even Obama wasn't. Obama sucked for the first 6 months of his run. And Obama was the most talented campaigner anyone has seen for 30 years. Who is this person? Is Newsom that person? Is Whitmer this person who in 11 weeks is going to be better than Obama? It's just so unconvincing. It is too late. This needed to happen so long ago. So I'm not saying that Biden's going to win. He may well lose because he's too old. But, that's the decision he made a year ago. And there's no way around it now. as far as I'm concerned. I mean, do you agree or not?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I guess, you know, the argument potentially would be that you say, right, it's going to Kamala, she's next in line, Gretchen, Gavin, do not, you know, so you sort of pre-broker the convention. And also, just a weird historical thing. So it's going to be in Chicago this year, and 1968.
Yes.
Record, convention was in Chicago as well. Famously had riots and all sorts of it was pretty nasty.
Yeah. Okay. Do you? I know you've got other stuff prepared. Is there anything else that you want to talk to from what you've prepared that we can just go straight to?
No. We've been running for quite a while now, so now we're going to work for that 3 hours. I mean, I guess just what we chatted about, probably just the fun thing is Mike Lindell having to pay $5 million to the guy who proved him wrong from the Prove Mike Wrong challenge.
He proved him wrong
about the election. Yeah, I mean, it already seems like his ads got taken off. So the My Pillow guy who got famous for advertising on Fox News, his commercials got taken off the air earlier this year because he couldn't even pay Fox News the bill. The Better Business Bureau has sort of revoked his business because they were doing, you know, buy one get one free offers that weren't actually a buy one get one free. It was just the price of this bloody pillow. And he's also obviously caught up in the Dominion defamation suit.
And Smartmatic as well.
Yeah. So it sort of seems like he's, again, just kind of trying to get the attention of the big boss. And just I don't think Trump's not going to come to his aid.
I think
so.
Trump
Maybe
needs his own money right now.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you maybe if you know, just the hope that he makes enough of a spectacle of himself that someone's going to help him out. But it looks like his sort of life might be coming full circle again.
I think my favorite thing about that story. So just to back over a little bit there. So he had his prove me wrong about Trump's election, about the rigged election. Anyone who could debunk his alleged evidence of Chinese interference in the 2020 election, he said he'd give $5 million to. And then someone immediately proved that their evidence was bullshit. But he had his lawyer on the judging panel, and his lawyer said, no, I don't think this is good enough. And so then this guy then took them out to arbitration, and the arbitration court said, no, you're paying him $5 million. My favorite bit about this story is that the guy who did it is a massive Trump supporter. But he just wanted to win $5 million. It's just, the one thing that can convince these guys that the election isn't rigged is if $5 million is riding on it. So there you go. While we're doing the 2020 update there, you might as well do the other one as well, the Georgia one. You across that, or do you want me to do it?
So that's the True the Vote.
True the Vote,
yeah.
These are the guys who came up with the material for, was it 2,000 Mules or whatever it's called? The mules, the Dinesh D'Souza documentary about the rigged election.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Some
Dinesh
number
always
of
pops up
mules.
in those things. But it looks like they'd been stringing out the judge in Georgia for a long while about, you know, supposedly coming up with evidence, and looks like their lawyers finally admitted this week that they don't have any evidence whatsoever. Which was, I mean, the fact they didn't even try, you know, to really get something that's happening, just their lawyers said no, which makes me think, honestly, they're probably just run out of money or something like that, and they just can't keep stringing out the court case.
I just love the way Georgia does this so much. They've done this a few times now. Georgia, when people give them shit about rigged elections, they go, right, we're taking you to, we're going to court, and we're going to get your evidence, and we're going to subpoena it if we need to. Like if you want to, we will call your bluff every single time. I love that they do that. And so, in this case, True the Vote said they had a detailed account of coordinated efforts to collect and deposit ballots in drop boxes across Metro Atlanta in the 2020 election, and that their investigators spoke with several individuals regarding personal knowledge, methods, and organizations involved in ballot trafficking in Georgia. And they said one person, John Doe, admitted to personally participating in providing specific information about the ballot trafficking process. So Georgia then took them to court. They asked for any recordings, transcripts, witness statements, or other documents supporting their allegations. The lawyer said that they've made every additional reasonable effort to locate responsive items, but they said unfortunately they had confidentiality agreements, and so then Georgia said, "Fine, don't give us the evidence, give us the confidentiality agreement," and that's when they said, "We've got nothing." And then, good on them. Good on you, Georgia.
It just is remarkable to me that people are still trying to do this whole 2020 vote rigging thing, when the 2024 election is underway, and sort of money and resources need to be going to that. I mean, I guess it's maybe just insurance if Trump loses again. But yeah, the fact that there's still money and energy, and perhaps this just speaks to the fact that maybe the money and the energy is running out, that they didn't even really show, couldn't even come up with anything. But yeah, I mean, Georgia. We're going to know a lot about the Georgia legal system over the next few years, I think.
We will.
So,
we will. Oh,
yeah.
That's a whole other area. That was one of the things I cut out from the last podcast was the Funny Willis section. I would have brought her in now, except for where, as you say, the 3-hour limit we got to watch out for. And so Dave is something I can look forward to doing the Funny Willis section again. I did with him last week. I got one more update, and then we should wrap up. And that is, you remember the robocall, the very, very convincing Biden robocall from New Hampshire, which I'll play to you guys there.
What a bunch of malarkey. We know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count. It's important that you save your vote for the November election. We'll need your help in electing Democrats up and down the ticket. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again. Your vote makes a difference in November, not this Tuesday. If you would like to be removed from future calls, please press 2 now.
See, you can tell it's Biden because he says malarkey. But on the other hand, there's some very subtle clues that's not Biden. For a start, he's speaking at a normal pace. And secondly, he makes no gaffes. But anyway, obviously that wasn't Biden, but we found out who was responsible. Have you heard this?
No.
This guy's called Paul Carpenter, and you should know about him because he's from your neck of the woods. He's from New Orleans. He's a magician from New Orleans, Paul Carpenter. Now that AI robocall was definitely not magic or even close to it, but he was hired by a guy. He says he was hired by a guy called Steve Kramer to make multiple imitations of politicians' voices, including the one of Biden and Lindsey Graham, apparently. Who is Steve Kramer? He's worked on ballot access for Dean Phillips, the very little known primary challenger to Joe Biden. Carpenter provided NBC with texts, emails, and Venmo payment receipts proving that was the case. Carpenter says that Kramer directed him to delete all their email correspondence as soon as the news broke about the robocall. And those emails included instructions for creating the AI recording and the script that Carpenter followed. I guess he didn't delete them. Nothing sus there. The Phillips campaign says that Kramer completed his contract several weeks ago. Is no longer in communication, but they will consider taking legal action if the allegations are true, they said. But here's the real sting about it all. Poor old Dean Phillips. Number one, Carpenter in this story told NBC he'd never heard of Dean Phillips. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, Phillips is so little a threat to Joe Biden that no one even cares. If this was someone of significance, this was like the Haley Trump thing, there'd be a huge story. But the fact is Dean Phillips, people just go, whatever. I'm not going to bother reporting on it. Like, I mean, this is like a little column inch in the 8th column of the newspaper, So anyway.
Yeah, just adding to that, I was just Googling, and Carpenter was paid $150.
Yes.
So it's I don't think it's the most high level operation.
Dare I say it? I don't think they got their money's worth from that AI recording, I've got to say. But anyway, Elle, thank you so much for sticking with me through the wee hours, even though it's not the wee hours for you. But and thank you so much for so much good stuff on Russia, which I don't even want to think about how shit that would have been if I'd done that by myself.
Planet Russia.
Yes, it is.
Special Planet Russia.
Yeah, from Russia.
No, thanks for having me. And you should go get some sleep.
I think I might. Well, yeah. I've got a script to write for the Wednesday show in about 4 hours. So it's not going to be too much sleep, but it's going to be welcome anyway. People know about my lifestyle. There's nothing newsy about this. Anyway, thank you so much. I will see you soon and stay peppy.
Cool. Thanks for having me.